What if the world you see, day after day, isn't quite as stable as it seems? That nagging doubt creeps in when you catch sight of a glitch, a bizarre slip in the fabric of ordinary life that leaves you reeling and wondering whether something, or someone, is rewriting the code behind your everyday experiences. One instant, you're walking along a street you've known all your life. The next, you're staring at a storefront that shouldn't exist. You do a double take, adrenaline rising, half expecting someone to jump out and reveal it's all a prank. But no, the building stands there in silent defiance of your memory, and that fleeting moment of confusion morphs into an uncanny certainty. Your reality, so solid and predictable mere seconds before, has revealed a gaping crack. It's these anomalies, these reality glitches, that spark a quiet panic in the back of your mind. Maybe you pick up an everyday object to find its label has changed, even though you could swear it was different yesterday. Or you run into someone who claims they've known you all your life, but you can't remember meeting them, and no one else notices anything amiss, leaving you to question your own sanity. Are you losing touch with reality, or is reality itself not as rigid as you believed? Such incidents have a way of lingering, making you second-guess even the most mundane details. The more you dwell on them, the more you start to suspect that the familiar rules, gravity, continuity, cause and effect, might be nothing but a comfortable facade. Could it be that what we call real life is fragile, prone to unexpected rewrites or shifts in the background narrative? Once the possibility seeps in, every corner of your day might harbor the next glitch. A missing piece of your surroundings, a conversation that unfolds like someone hit copy plus paste on the wrong dialogue, or a memory shared by no one else but you. And in these mystifying moments, the world tilts, hinting that you're caught in a cosmic drama where cracks in the script are inevitable, if only you look closely enough. Let's discuss some reality glitches. The NPC Encounter. Imagine you're at the grocery store on a slow Wednesday afternoon, idly picking through the produce, when something about the person next to you just doesn't sit right. You don't know them, but as they move from apples to oranges, every gesture feels bizarrely mechanical. At one point, they glance your way, eyes meeting yours, and for a fleeting second, it's as if there's nothing behind them. Not the usual tiredness or a vague aloofness, but a much deeper absence. You can't pinpoint why, and you'd have a hard time explaining it to anyone else. But that moment sends a mild jolt through your entire body. Is there actually someone there? The suspicion might dissipate after a few moments, leaving you feeling faintly unsettled, but it plants a seed in your mind that refuses to die. You wonder if you've just witnessed something more unnerving than a quirk of human behavior. A glitch revealing that not everyone you encounter necessarily has the same conscious spark you do. This unsettling notion is often called the NPC encounter. The term NPC, borrowed from gaming culture, stands for non-player character, one of those background figures in a role-playing or open-world game that isn't controlled by a human user, but by code or AI. They appear to do their own thing, walking about, delivering quest lines, repeating dialogue. But behind all that is no real agency, just a script. In the actual world, you wouldn't normally consider the person stocking shelves or the person bagging your groceries to be mindless automata. Yet the NPC encounter arises when, just for an instant, you're struck by the disquieting possibility that they might be. It's a subtle, personal kind of reality glitch, less about blatant cosmic anomalies like disappearing buildings or contradictory timelines, and more about a small tear in your assumption that every human being has a rich interior life. Typically, we rely on an unspoken, bedrock belief that the people around us experience consciousness the way we do. Indeed, our social, ethical, and emotional lives rest upon it. We empathize because we assume others truly feel things. We punish wrongdoing because we assume the perpetrator has motives, self-awareness, and moral responsibility. We share jokes, sorrows, and joys on the basis that other minds can resonate with ours. But in the NPC encounter, you find yourself momentarily stripped of that assumption. You look at someone's behavior, their eyes, their voice, and feel a profound mechanical emptiness. It might be a coworker who always repeats the same conversation topics with the same intonation, a neighbor who stands outside at the same time every afternoon, delivering the same pleasantries, or simply a random stranger whose eyes appear to lack any hint of an inner vantage. You find yourself thinking, are they really conscious, or are they just reacting? Of course, the most obvious explanation is that we're overreading a momentary vibe or misinterpreting normal human eccentricities. People can appear robotic for all sorts of reasons: fatigue, shyness, or a personal quirk. But the key element in an NPC encounter is that the sense of emptiness lingers in your gut. It's less an intellectual deduction and more of a direct jolt. Your instincts flash, no one's home. This suspicion can follow you out of the grocery store, simmering in the back of your mind. And then, once you're aware of it, you begin seeing that same uncanny blankness in other people. Maybe not everyone, but enough that you start feeling like you're in a surreal cosmic experiment. If you're prone to certain conspiratorial or simulation-based interpretations of reality, you might connect the dots. Perhaps a fraction of those around you truly do lack consciousness in the same sense you have it, fulfilling roles in a vast environment that only needs a few fully rendered minds. Everyone else, so the argument goes, is code, sophisticated enough to behave convincingly but devoid of a subjective vantage point. In online circles, such ideas sometimes stay on the level of memes or insults, calling someone an NPC for being unoriginal or for parroting mainstream media lines. That usage trivializes the deeper, existential shock that the real NPC encounter can produce. Because if you genuinely allow yourself to believe you've spotted a consciousness-less human being in the flesh, you wind up questioning the entire social tapestry of your life. You might ask, could it be that half my coworkers or neighbors are running on autopilot? What about my boss who always repeats the same catchphrases? Or that polite but monotonous barista? Each time you notice mechanical, cyclical behavior, you recall that moment of emptiness and wonder if it means they literally lack an inner self. That's a profoundly alienating place to be, psychologically. Suddenly, the warm sense of being in a shared human family can feel illusory, replaced by the suspicion that maybe only a handful of you are real players in a cosmic or digital environment. This contrasts with more typical reality glitches, like spotting a building that shouldn't exist or noticing a brand name spelled differently across multiple timelines. Those revolve around external data points that can, in principle, be cross-checked with others. If you mention to a friend, "Hey, do you remember that shop being on the other side of the street?" They might confirm it, giving you external validation that something weird is up. But with the NPC encounter, it's purely personal. If you say, "I think that person's a script follower," your friend might shrug and say, "They seem normal to me." There's no external artifact you can point to, just your subjective sense of hollowness behind that person's eyes. And so this glitch remains a secret suspicion for many. You don't want to come off as unkind or delusional by labeling someone a mindless placeholder, so you keep it to yourself, and that intensifies the feeling that you've stumbled on a hidden crack in reality that nobody else cares to notice. Skeptics will argue that we can't go around diagnosing people as NPCs just because they behave predictably. Humans are diverse, with personalities that range from highly spontaneous to extremely routine-based. Some suffer from mental health issues or conditions that make them appear closed off or repetitive. But even acknowledging all those nuances, those who experience an NPC encounter describe it as an unmistakable vibe, like an aura of, "There's no consciousness behind that face." It's not just the repetition of phrases, it's the total absence of emotional spontaneity or genuine engagement, a sense that interactions are being pulled from a script rather than from any wellspring of inner experience. One might also link the NPC encounter to older philosophical debates about philosophical zombies, perfect physical duplicates of humans who possess no subjective awareness. That concept is typically used to question whether consciousness is fully explainable by physical processes. If it's logically possible to have the same physical structure but no consciousness, then consciousness might be something extra. But rarely do philosophers claim to encounter such zombies in real life. The NPC notion suggests maybe we do, and we only rarely notice the slip. If you push that line further, you might ask if everyone is an NPC except you. That merges into radical solipsism, where you can't be sure anyone else truly has a vantage. Usually, we set that aside because it's too crippling for normal social function. But an abrupt, jarring moment can resurrect that dormant skepticism and throw it in your face. What if your entire worldview is built around illusions of other minds? The emotional consequences can be profound. If you start believing in the NPC phenomenon wholeheartedly, you might find yourself pulling away from certain social connections or losing empathy. Conversely, you might cling to empathy, deciding that even if they are placeholders, you'll treat them kindly. The moral dilemma is reminiscent of how we might treat advanced AI in the future. If an entity perfectly mimics human behavior but you suspect it lacks subjective experience, how do you ethically respond? The difference is that the NPC Encounter purports that the phenomenon might be happening right now in your everyday life with flesh and blood humans. That's a more shocking possibility than dealing with AI chatbots or robots, because you're used to seeing them as plainly mechanical. A living, breathing human, on the other hand, is not supposed to be empty. People who get hooked on this notion sometimes develop elaborate personal criteria for spotting NPCs. Cyclical conversation scripts, consistent emotional flatness, an inability to discuss new or abstract topics, or a literal vacant look in the eyes. Yet all of those can be explained by normal psychology or personality differences. That tension between plausible normal explanations and your gut feeling that no, this is something deeper, is what makes the NPC encounter so tantalizing and yet impossible to prove. You might find a coworker who embodies every single NPC trait, but if you tell others, they might see that coworker as just quiet or uncreative. You alone remain stuck with the unnerving suspicion that you glimpsed a real glitch in the social fabric. When it comes to simulation theory, many see the NPC phenomenon as consistent with a resource-saving strategy in a simulated world. Not every character can or needs to be fully conscious, so the code simply populates the environment with script-bound stand-ins, awarding real consciousness only to a handful of player characters. If you accept that premise, your moment of noticing the hollowness is a glitch, a tiny slip where the simulation failed to mask that person's code limitations from your perception. The next day, you might see them patched with a bit more spontaneity, or else you might see them vanish from your life entirely. That's how some interpret those weird scenarios where a neighbor suddenly moves away without explanation or a coworker abruptly quits after you start noticing their NPC-ness. The question remains whether you're weaving a conspiracy from random events or actually detecting cracks in a carefully designed system. In a more spiritual or esoteric sense, some might say the NPC encounter ties into beliefs that only certain beings have souls or that many live in a dreamlike haze. Many mystical traditions teach that the majority of people remain spiritually asleep, though they technically still have consciousness. The radical step is to claim they have no consciousness at all. That difference is huge. A spiritually asleep person can awaken, but an NPC in the strict sense never can. This can color your entire perspective on redemption or growth. If they're not truly aware, can they grow or awaken? Or is their existence purely a placeholder meant to fill out the tapestry of your personal journey? Some individuals handle the NPC encounter by adopting a safest assumption approach. They keep the possibility open but treat everyone as conscious anyway, on the off chance they're mistaken. Others embrace it fully, concluding that only a small fraction of people are real. Those who do the latter might find they've lost a certain innocence about everyday interactions, forever scanning others' eyes for that spark or absence of spark. When they find the absence, they feel a mixture of dread and grim fascination, as if glimpsing the scaffolding behind a stage set. No matter how they respond, the core glitch remains that they no longer trust the universal presumption of other minds. While the NPC encounter is rarely as dramatic as time loops or shifting buildings, it can be more personally jarring. Physical anomalies don't typically undermine your social bonds. If you see a missing building, it's weird, but you can still talk to a friend about it, believing you both share conscious awareness of the event. With an NPC suspicion, you can't even rely on that sense of shared wonder. If you suspect your friend is an NPC, your very conversation might be script-driven from their side. That's a heavier blow to your sense of communal reality than any purely external glitch. It's no wonder that for many who experience it, the feeling of, "I can't shake how fake they seemed," can linger for months or years, even if they tell no one. Despite all this, it's worth emphasizing how intangible the NPC encounter is. You'll never have physical proof. It's basically a personal epiphany, a jolt that your usual assumptions could be wrong. Some will find it revelatory, Others will find it a sign of creeping paranoia or misanthropy. It does, however, fit neatly into the broader pantheon of reality glitches. Moments that slice through the everyday illusion of seamless normalcy, hinting that we live in a far stranger context than we admit. If physical anomalies make you question time or matter, the NPC phenomenon makes you question consciousness itself, arguably a more unsettling realm because so much of our moral and emotional life depends on trusting other minds are real. The real challenge with the NPC encounter is its lasting uncertainty. Even if you stop dwelling on it, there's no going back to the naive confidence that everyone you meet is fully conscious. That question can lurk at the edges of your awareness. How do I know this person has an inner world? Rationally, you can't any more than you can prove they exist outside of your own perceptions. But normally, we set aside such philosophical doubts in order to function socially. The NPC encounter forcibly reintroduces them in a moment that feels less academic and more like a direct sensory shock. You look at them, and it's as if the world just revealed a crack in the show. You might then wonder what else is illusory. Whether you adopt a simulation lens or a different worldview, the NPC encounter remains a potent example of how a glitch can be entirely psychological, yet still rock your sense of everyday reality. No timeline changed, no object vanished, no physical law was broken. Just your deep-rooted trust in the universality of consciousness took a direct hit. In some respects, that's a more devastating glitch than any external phenomenon. If you lose faith in others' interior lives, the structure of society and empathy is at stake. Conversely, it can spur an unusual kind of wonder. If only a few individuals carry real awareness, does that mean you have a special role or vantage? In the end, you might never disclose the NPC encounter to anyone. It might remain a private speculation. If you do share it, you risk odd looks or pushback. But internally, it reconfigures how you see the world. You might treat each new person with caution, scanning for signs of spontaneity or emotional range. You might cling more tightly to friends who clearly display genuine creativity or empathy, seeing them as fellow player characters. Or maybe you dismiss the entire notion as a freakish moment of overanalysis, quietly returning to normal life. Still, you can't unknow that flash of emptiness you perceived, that second when you felt convinced someone was an elaborate shell. That memory lingers, a private glitch in your sense of the shared human condition. That's the essence of the NPC encounter. It's not a widely verifiable phenomenon, and it won't show up in big glitch compilations as often as buildings spontaneously appearing or Mandela effects that multiple people recall. But for those who experience it, it can be among the most haunting anomalies of all. Because if reality is truly glitching, the idea that actual people might be placeholders is arguably more profound than any ephemeral distortion of time or space. It strikes at the heart of who we are as social beings, and the possibility that not all the faces around us belong to minds like ours. Creepy coincidences in media is that subtle, hair-raising feeling you get when a fictional story, show, or piece of pop culture seems to predict real events with uncanny accuracy. You may have heard it before. People talk about certain episodes of The Simpsons eerily foreshadowing political outcomes, or old novels detailing disasters nearly identical to future catastrophes, right down to the timing and scale. At first glance, these coincidences seem too bizarre to be chalked up to chance. Once you notice enough of them, you start asking, is something else going on here? Maybe it's a cosmic wink, or a glitch in our presumed linear reality, or some grand underlying script that the creators unknowingly tapped into. And so you find yourself in the realm of creepy coincidences in media, a reality glitch that suggests art and imagination sometimes bleed into actual events in ways we can't fully explain. It begins innocently. You stumble across an old comic strip from decades past that depicts a technological invention suspiciously similar to our modern smartphones. Or you watch a classic film where a random reference to a future year lines up exactly with the release date of some real invention that transforms society. It's easy to dismiss one or two such coincidences. After all, with enough predictions and guesses, some are bound to come true. But occasionally, you stumble upon coincidences so detailed that your skepticism falters. A novel describing a massive ocean liner named Titan sinking in the North Atlantic years before the RMS Titanic even existed. a show that outlines a major tragedy or global event in specifics that mirror what eventually happens. It creeps under your skin, making you wonder if the creators had a mysterious insight or if reality itself can be spoiled in mass media. Where normal prophecy or premonition is often wrapped in mysticism, creepy coincidences in media are less about deliberate predictions and more about accidental hits. The story didn't claim to foresee the future, it was just fiction. But then real life lines up with that fiction in jaw-dropping ways. So it's not your typical prophet or fortune-teller scenario. Instead, it's a glitch, like stumbling on the script for future events in a piece of random entertainment. That glitch can make you question the boundary between imagination and actuality. Are storytellers simply channeling something from the collective unconscious? Or is it that we live in a reality where time or causation is more fluid than we suspect, letting future events cast backward shadows into the creative mind? You can't help but recall some of the spookiest examples. There's Futility, an 1898 novella about a ship called Titan that hits an iceberg in the North Atlantic, eerily paralleling the RMS Titanic disaster in 1912. There's the cartoon series that included a storyline about a person named Trump becoming president, at a time when that prospect seemed outlandish. Over time, fans compiled a dizzying list of apparently predicted events on that show, ranging from specific gadgets to sports outcomes, blurring the line between comedic speculation and actual prophecy. Or consider older Japanese manga that referenced advanced robotics or weapons technology that would appear in real-life prototypes decades later. In each instance, the coincidences are so tight that you walk away unsettled, feeling like you just glimpsed behind the curtain of a staged play called Our Timeline. Some folks rationalize that out of all the creative works in history, it's only natural some would contain elements that mirror future occurrences. Writers, after all, often do thorough research or extrapolate trends. The law of large numbers suggests that with enough fiction, certain plot points will match real events eventually. But that explanation can feel hollow when you're confronted with details so specific, so improbable, that pure chance doesn't fully soothe your nagging sense of weirdness. That's when it tilts into glitch territory. You find yourself suspecting that reality and fictional media might be intertwined in ways we barely grasp, as if time and creativity sometimes mingle, letting a random script from decades ago echo events that only later come to pass. People who collect these coincidences speak of them with equal parts fascination and dread. They'll show you side-by-side comparisons. A scene from a cartoon or a B-movie, and a news headline from years later. The parallels can be so exact, it's as if the film's prop department designed a real-life object or the cartoon storyline is an unintentional blueprint for political drama. Each example alone might be passable as a coincidence, but collectively, they form a pattern too eerie to ignore. Fans call it life imitating art, but in the context of reality glitches, it feels more like a breach in the wall between fiction and fact. A crack that reveals the possibility of prescripted events or some weird morphic resonance allowing future truths to seep into present storytelling. It's important to note that not every prediction in media is a bullseye. For every correct guess, there may be dozens of misses that no one remembers. But creepy coincidences in media specifically highlight those that are so accurate and bizarre that they can't help but evoke a sense of cosmic irony or planning. Even a single freakishly correct forecast can jar your sense that the future is unwritten. Because if random media keeps guessing the future, maybe time doesn't flow in a neat linear path. Or maybe we're living in a reality so vast that the improbable happens occasionally, but it only seems meaningful to us because we notice the hits and ignore the misses. The truth is elusive, leaving behind only that uneasy thrill that arises whenever you see a timeline-lagging piece of fiction that nails the real outcome years later. Some people treat these coincidences in media as evidence of an actual simulation. The scriptwriters unknowingly download spoiler data from the underlying code that orchestrates events. It's reminiscent of how a glitch in a video game might reveal upcoming storylines before the official in-game triggers happen. If we truly inhabit a programmed environment, then a glitch might slip future code into the minds of unsuspecting writers, resulting in eerily prescient plot points. That's a radical notion, of course, but it lines up with the more general impetus behind reality glitches. The sense that the world is less random or linear than we assume, and that cracks in the facade sometimes show. Others interpret these coincidences as tapping into the collective unconscious, an idea that creativity is partially derived from a shared psychic pool bridging past, present, and future. In that scenario, a writer or cartoonist might unwittingly channel future truths. Again, mainstream logic might dismiss this as magical thinking, but from a glitch perspective, it's as plausible as any explanation for how a silly cartoon gag ends up matching real-world headlines decades later. And that's the crux. Either these are illusions of probability, or we accept that something more bizarre is at work, some hidden mechanism linking fiction and future fact. That sense of disquiet is heightened by the personal impact of stumbling across one of these coincidences. Perhaps you're idly browsing the internet late at night, come upon a clip from an old show, realize it's describing a scenario that matches a big political or social event from just last year. You get a chill reading the date stamp, confirming it predated the actual event. Maybe the lines of dialogue refer to an invention or crisis so specifically that you can't imagine it's a random guess. In that moment, you feel the ground shift beneath your normal assumptions about cause and effect. You wonder if the writers had an inside line on the future or if time folded back on itself in some improbable loop. You might go to bed that night with your mind buzzing, half expecting to wake up and see more parallels in tomorrow's news. This phenomenon can also lead to a weird sense of paranoia. If events are that easily predicted in a piece of pop culture, how many other future happenings lie hidden in the media we consume daily, unnoticed because they haven't come true yet? Some glitch-inclined fans start scouring old films or novels for coded references to times and places, hoping to identify the next major event. So far, nobody seems to systematically predict the future from these coincidences. It's always retrospective, adding to the glitchy sense that reality is messing with us after the fact, letting these bizarre parallels appear more as cosmic jokes than usable knowledge. We can compare creepy coincidences in media to the phenomenon of the Mandela effect, where large groups share false memories of brand names or historical details. Both rely on a sense that either memory or predictive capacity can slip between cracks, shaping our timeline in ways that defy normal logic. But whereas the Mandela effect concerns conflicting recollections, these media coincidences focus on how future events show up in older content. The effect is similarly unsettling, making you question the linear progression of time and the independence of fictional creativity. It's as if reality itself can't keep secrets from the pages of a script or the panels of a comic, inadvertently letting plotlines slip out in forms we only appreciate years later. Each new example stokes the same dread-laced curiosity. Could my favorite show be quietly forecasting next year's biggest world crisis or invention? Naturally, skeptics offer simpler explanations. They note that creative works often reflect emerging ideas that eventually turn real. For instance, an author might guess that phone technology will evolve into miniature handheld devices. Decades later, smartphones fulfill that hunch and we call it a prophecy. Or the earlier Titanic example might be explained by the fact that maritime hazards were known, and bigger ships were being built, so an author predicted a large liner sinking. The real Titanic sinking was a horrifying coincidence, but maybe not a glitch. Indeed, it's rational to say that among the countless storylines produced by human imagination, some will line up with future happenings. But even the staunchest realist can get goosebumps when confronted with the creepier, more specific parallels, like a storyline that spells out details too odd to dismiss as chance. Another angle is psychological selection. We highlight the correct hits but ignore the misses. This is the same argument used for alleged psychic predictions. Over centuries, thousands of predictions have been made in books and shows, and only a few come true. Yet that doesn't fully dispel the sense of cosmic mischief you feel when confronted with a match so on point it sends a chill down your spine. That emotional reaction is where the glitch-like flavor of creepy coincidences in media truly resides. A rational explanation might exist, but it can't erase the feeling that you just glimpsed a tear in your linear cause-and-effect worldview. It also intersects with our natural inclination to see patterns. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures, so we're primed to be stunned by rare alignments. However, the phenomenon's spiritual or conspiratorial dimension remains alive precisely because certain alignments defy the usual scope of coincidence. You can read about a comedic skit that predicted a major political scandal in scarily accurate detail, or see an animated show referencing technology that no one was even close to developing at the time. And each anecdote chips away at your faith that media is just random entertainment. Maybe it's partially a reflection or a partial leak from the future. That suspicion, unconfirmed but nagging, is what makes it a reality glitch. The personal aspect also can't be overlooked. People sometimes discover these coincidences in media from their childhood, rewatching a film they loved decades ago only to realize it outlines a scenario that recently played out. A sense of deja vu merges with the glitch vibe, intensifying the sensation that they glimpsed the future. This can foster a small wave of obsession. They might comb through that entire show or series, hunting for more secret predictions. In this way, creepy coincidences in media can become a rabbit hole, each new find adding momentum to the idea that the boundary between fiction and reality is not as rigid as we believe. Some individuals prefer a mystical explanation. A creative writer, when in a certain flow state, might tap into a universal consciousness or an Akashic-like field containing all possible events. The writer thinks they're inventing a storyline, but they're subconsciously channeling something that's destined to happen. Meanwhile, from a glitch perspective, this is akin to the code of reality bleeding through the creative mind's inspiration. The writer emerges as an accidental prophet, only recognized post-event. There's no final consensus on how or why it happens, merely that the phenomenon repeats often enough to be noticed, cataloged, and shared by watchers of reality's weirder corners. As with other reality glitches, many will walk away dismissing it as overblown coincidence. But those who've deeply felt the uncanny weight of these parallels can't shake the sense that some deeper riddle is at play, a puzzle hidden behind mainstream explanations. In this sense, creepy coincidences in media share a kinship with everything from building vanishings to NPC encounters. They remind us that what we label reality might not be as straightforward or linear as we were taught. When you watch a silly cartoon from years ago and realize it basically spelled out a major invention or event step by step, your sense of a stable timeline wavers. You might come to see your own daily life as part of a storyline that's already written somewhere, waiting to unfold. That's a deeply uncomfortable thought, yet strangely thrilling if you let it marinate. Above all, that is the essence of the glitch. It's a moment that cracks your safe worldview, injecting wonder, confusion, and the haunting question, what else has been predicted in some obscure show or novel that we just haven't lived through yet? Maybe the next global shift or revolution has already been spelled out in a random sci-fi short story that only a few hundred readers ever saw. Maybe your daily choices are dancing along a track that's partially mapped out in some script, be it comedic or tragic. If that doesn't give you goosebumps, then perhaps you haven't yet stumbled on one of those truly chilling coincidences that hits your personal triggers. Ultimately, creepy coincidences in media is a subtle but enduring reality glitch because it merges the comfortable realm of fictional entertainment with the unpredictability of future fact. Once you see a suspiciously exact overlap, you might approach everything from older films to brand new TV episodes with a little more reverence or caution, scanning for clues about what might lie ahead. You might ask if the writer is just scarily perceptive or if they unknowingly glimpsed a timeline. And next time you see an outlandish plot or comedic prediction, maybe you'll wonder whether, in some not-too-distant future, it'll come true in ways none of us expect, eventually making headlines as yet another spine-tingling coincidence. Such is the essence of the glitch, bridging imagination and reality, leaving you caught between awe and uncertainty, never entirely sure if it's all mere chance or something far more contrived lurking behind the scenes. Glimpses of the Matrix it usually hits at the most ordinary moments. You're waiting at a crosswalk, scrolling your phone in line, or glancing up from your computer in a half-daydream when you catch a fleeting strangeness that shouldn't be there. Maybe it's two cars driving past, identical down to the license plate or the tiniest bumper sticker, and they pass you in the exact same way just seconds apart. Or you notice someone's shadow doesn't quite match their body's position for a split second, as if reality's geometry glitched. These are what people sometimes call glimpses of the Matrix. Eerie little hiccups in an otherwise seamless world, moments that stir a quiet panic in your gut and leave you convinced, if only for a heartbeat, that you've just seen through the polished veneer we label reality. What marks these glimpses isn't necessarily high drama. It's not like a building disappears in front of your eyes or your entire day replays in reverse. Instead, it's the delicate weirdness of, say, hearing the exact same sentence from two different people in quick succession, word for word, right down to the same half-laugh at the end. Or checking your phone's clock at random intervals only to find the same repeated time, like 12:12 or 3:33, whenever you glance at it, as though someone coded the world to wink at you through this trivial pattern. One might shrug off each instance as a quirk, but the more such coincidences pile up, the more you sense these tiny rips in the cosmic wallpaper. They're miniature anomalies that, if you let them, can unravel your sense that this environment is a straightforward, physical domain. Instead, you feel a distinct suspicion that it's all a cleverly maintained construct, and you just caught it stumbling. We borrow the term matrix from pop culture, especially the iconic film that introduced the notion of our lived reality being a digital simulation managed by unseen architects. In that movie, a glitch is something like seeing a cat cross a hallway twice. But out in the real world, the anomalies are subtler and often more personal. You're typically alone in spotting them, and they vanish so fast you can't double-check. You might see a pedestrian vanish around a corner at an angle that doesn't physically make sense. Or you hear a dog bark in the distance, but the bark loops exactly the same way multiple times, as though someone copy-pasted the audio clip. It's enough to make your heart jolt, but the moment's gone in seconds. You stand there in a mild daze, wondering if your eyes or ears played tricks on you. Still, the creeping possibility that your senses caught something real is unnerving. That's exactly why people classify these experiences as glimpses of the matrix, ephemeral clues to a hidden artificial layer beneath the everyday. Skeptics will say we're reading too much into coincidences or illusions. They'll point out that the human brain is wired to spot patterns, even where none exist. And indeed, a lot of suspicious repeats or weird synchronicities can be chalked up to chance or observational bias. Perhaps you notice a repeating clock time because your mind finds it remarkable and thus remembers it, ignoring the times you looked at the clock and saw nothing special. Or you might see two people in the same outfit standing side by random happenstance. Fine, rational explanations exist. Yet some of these glimpses remain too bizarre, too perfectly timed, to dismiss so easily, stirring in you a primal sense that you just witnessed a code hiccup. Sometimes these matrix-like moments happen during quiet times of day, when you're alone and your environment is near empty. You might glance down the street and see a parked car flicker, as if a light source momentarily re-rendered it. You blink and it's normal again. That's not the kind of thing you mention to a friend without sounding a bit off, so you keep it to yourself. Weeks or months later, it might happen again in a different form. A leaf in midair appears to pause for an instant, defying gravity, then resumes its fall as though a glitch reversed itself. You can't help but think, what are the odds? And am I the only one noticing? Over time, these tiny oddities accumulate into a hush of suspicion that the stable world is not so stable. One reason these glimpses are so riveting is their personal, almost intimate nature. They usually don't make the news. You're not reading big headlines about reality glitched for everyone. It's always you, quietly noticing a slip that might be imperceptible to others. That secrecy adds to their psychological impact. It's like a private conversation between you and reality, one where reality occasionally fails to keep its illusions running smoothly. The effect is reminiscent of a video game environment that only fully renders what the player sees, or occasionally stutters if the code can't keep up. In modern digital contexts, the idea that we might live in something akin to a game becomes more than an idle metaphor. If our real environment can stutter or replicate data, you can almost sense the underlying program coding it all. Some watchers of these phenomena share their stories online, describing the time they saw an identical bus pass twice with the same passengers, or the moment they perceived a color shift in the sky that no one else commented on. Despite the variety of forms these glimpses can take, they share that haunting vibe, the world dropping its facade for half a second, then snapping back. Others talk about seeing a stutter in a friend's motion or hearing an echo in the environment that repeated everything exactly. A recurring theme is the absolute fleetingness. As soon as you focus on it, it's over, leaving you to question your memory. Indeed, a cynic can easily claim your memory just played a trick. But if you're the one who felt that pulse of wrongness, it doesn't feel so easily waved away. Some interpret this phenomenon less in terms of a digital simulation and more in terms of a dreamlike or mental projection of reality. They'll say these glimpses are signs that the dream is flickering, like a lucid dream moment where you realize the environment is shaped or flawed. The difference is we typically call our daily life waking reality, not a dream. But experiences like seeing a bizarre repeat or a mismatch in physics might nudge you to consider that daily life might not be so different from a carefully maintained mental environment or cosmic dream. Either lens can lead to the same unsettling conclusion. The environment is not purely objective or external. It might be dynamic and reactive, occasionally messing up, which is precisely what glitch watchers claim. One might also note how glimpses of the matrix sometimes complement other known reality glitches. If you see a building vanish or you experience a timeline shift, that's a major event. But along the path, you might also notice smaller echoes, repeated sequences, uncanny coincidences, or local anomalies in how objects behave. These smaller flickers can prime you for the bigger meltdown if it ever happens. Or, if you never witness a grand event, the little glimpses alone might suffice to erode your confidence in the usual materialist model of the world. After all, if you can't trust that the figure who just walked by your peripheral vision was truly there, how can you be sure of anything else your senses report? Philosophically, we could argue that glimpses highlight the idea that perception might be partial or constructed. Some see them as illusions, yes, but from a glitch perspective, illusions might be the entire operating environment, and these microfailures are the system's inability to hide that from you. So each glitch poses an implicit question. Are we witnessing an error in the code or just an error in our neural processes? That question never resolves, which is part of what gives these experiences their lasting power. A building momentarily flickering might be your eyes or your mind, or it might truly be a slip in the cosmic program. Those who are more psychologically inclined might note how these glimpses typically happen during moments of inattentiveness or transitional states of mind. For example, you're tired, daydreaming, or stressed, and your brain is more likely to misfire. But from a glitch hunter stance, maybe that's exactly when the simulation slacks off, assuming you're not fully paying attention. The code might loosen its detail if it senses your mind is elsewhere, giving you a shot at seeing behind the scenes. That's half the thrill. Maybe your unfocused state is precisely what opens you to noticing the environment's rendering errors. On a personal level, glimpses of the matrix can radically alter how you navigate everyday life. You start paying attention to patterns, scanning for more anomalies, maybe seeking that rush of recognition that your surroundings are indeed glitching. Some find this exhilarating, transforming mundane routines into a treasure hunt for cosmic slip-ups. Others find it destabilizing, constantly checking themselves for illusions. If you collect enough of these glimpses in your mental ledger, you might start confiding in a friend or an online forum, only to realize many others have had similar "did I just see that?" episodes. You might discover repeated motifs, like the double cat crossing the same path, the copy and paste conversation snippet, or the color shift in the sky that no one else noticed. Realizing you're not alone can strengthen your belief that these are indeed glimpses, not mere personal quirks. Still, conventional consensus remains that these phenomena are chance or psychological illusions. That's what a standard worldview would conclude. We misperceive or misremember, and the illusions feel real because we're predisposed to find meaning. Yet the hallmark of a glitch is that it defies standard explanations in a way that resonates intimately with you, the observer. Even if you can't prove it, you can't unfeel that momentary electric shock that said, "The system just slipped." And that's the secret power of glimpses of the matrix. They rely on personal, immediate intuition that overrides rational disclaimers. You know what you saw or heard or felt, and no amount of external doubt can fully erase that memory. In some ways, these glimpses can mirror an almost mystical or religious experience, minus the typical language of divine presence. Instead of angels or miracles, you're seeing a raw glitch in the code. But the emotional resonance can be similar, a sense that the normal rules flickered, revealing a realm beyond our day-to-day illusions. The difference is that it's not necessarily holy, just bizarre and out of place. Some glitch observers say they feel a sense of cosmic awe or humility, akin to how mystics feel encountering the divine. Others feel spooked, as though they just discovered they live in a high-tech fishbowl. The emotional palette ranges widely, but it's seldom neutral. Once you suspect even the slightest possibility that your environment is artificially managed, your place in it feels different. Perhaps you see it as a game or a puzzle, or you adopt a mission to find more cracks. Either way, your usual complacency about a safe, material world might fade. Skeptical friends may reassure you that everyone experiences weird coincidences or illusions from time to time. They might tell you it's normal and nothing to dwell on. That's fair. But if your glimpses keep reoccurring, always in that moment you'd least expect them, or always in similarly improbable circumstances, the brush-off explanations lose their potency. Indeed, you might begin to see patterns in when and how the glitches appear, hinting that someone or something is orchestrating them. Some interpret it as the simulation gently nudging them to wake up. Others see it as random alignment. The result is a swirl of speculation, with no definitive closure in sight. While glimpses of the Matrix might not be as dramatic as entire timeline jumps or shape-shifting buildings, they can be just as potent psychologically. A minor stutter in your environment can do more to rattle your mind than reading a wild story about a huge cosmic glitch that happened to someone else. Because these moments are personal, ephemeral, and unshared, they're the perfect seeds of quiet existential doubt. You might roll your eyes at public claims of big anomalies, but that weird flicker you saw last week in your own living room remains impossible to forget. That's why these glimpses spread more through whispered conversations or late-night confessions than official glitch catalogs. They're the real, raw fabric of suspicion that keeps the simulation narrative alive. At the end of the day, how you handle them is up to you. Maybe you remain open yet skeptical, acknowledging you might have caught an honest glitch in the system or might have had a small neural hiccup. Or you become a full-blown glitch hunter, scanning your world for more hints that we're in a coded environment. In either case, these fleeting events remain unprovable, eluding any final verdict. And perhaps that's the best definition of a glimpse of the Matrix. It's neither a guaranteed sign we're in a simulation nor a mere psychological slip, but a liminal moment that yanks you from mundane acceptance into an unsteady, questioning stance about reality itself. Whether you decide that stance is enriching or unsettling is a personal choice. But once you've felt that flash of unreality, a moment so precise and improbable you can't help but label it a glitch, you might never fully return to the old confidence that everything is as it seems. Instead, you'll move forward with an undercurrent of watchfulness, half expecting the code to slip again, just enough for you to catch it in the act. Ghosts of alternate realities, they tend to appear in the strangest places, at the most unremarkable times, leaving you with a faint, uneasy thrill that what you thought was solid might be malleable, shifting beneath your feet. You'll be rummaging through old family photos and stumble on a snapshot that contradicts everything you remember, capturing a scene that shouldn't have been possible. Perhaps you spot yourself in the background of a relative's trip you were certain you never went on, or you see a building looming behind your childhood home that you know never existed in your timeline. The oddest part is that if you bring it up, no one else seems to recall the photo being that way. By the time you show someone, the photo might have vanished or reverted to a more consistent version. These fleeting encounters have come to be known by some as ghosts of alternate realities, and they represent one of the most quietly unsettling categories of reality glitches. Instead of a flashy cosmic slip or an obvious timeline jump, they manifest as small, dissonant artifacts. An object, a memory, a snippet of someone else's recollection, that whispers of a parallel universe brushing up against ours and then receding, leaving behind only an afterimage. First, you might blame your memory. Maybe you assumed you never traveled to that place, but you forgot. Or you blame some genealogical confusion for why there's a newspaper clipping that claims a distant aunt was married in a different year than everyone else recalls. But the deeper you dig, the more it starts to feel like these anomalies aren't mere mistakes but genuine imports from some other branch of existence. People notice details that simply don't align with the known historical record or official documents. A corner store that used to stand on your street up until last month is suddenly gone, and you can't find any permit or record that it ever operated. When you ask your neighbors, they look at you blankly. They recall no such store. But you vividly remember walking in and buying a soda. You might even have the bottle cap stashed somewhere, but the store itself has evaporated from the timeline, leaving not a shred of proof it ever stood there. Such incidents differ from the typical Mandela effect, which often involves shared false memories of brand names or iconic movie lines. Ghosts of alternate realities are more personal, more idiosyncratic. They might be an entire day you recall that no one else does, an acquaintance's anecdote about an event that nobody else experienced, or an old letter referencing a tragedy that, by all mainstream accounts, never happened. You clutch these bits of contradictory evidence, wondering if the universe rewrote itself overnight, or if you slipped across some boundary without realizing it. They are ghosts in the sense that they fade away quickly, seldom leaving physical proof that can be independently verified. Sometimes, you rush to show a friend, "Look at this weird reference in this old almanac that mentions a governor who never existed," only to open the almanac and find no such mention. It's gone, or perhaps never was, except for that fleeting moment when you witnessed it. This ephemeral aspect gives these glitches a spectral quality. They haunt you not by rattling chains in the attic, but by eroding the certainties of your personal timeline. You stand in your bedroom, turning the pages of an old scrapbook, half dreading each turn because who knows what reality-warping detail you might find. It can create a low-key paranoia, a sense that you're the only one who glimpses these fragments of an alternate branch, and you can't even prove they exist. It's far more subtle than a big, showy example like a building flickering out of existence in broad daylight while dozens of onlookers gasp. Instead, it's just you, alone with a contradictory photograph, or hearing an offhand remark from an acquaintance that describes a version of last summer that never happened in your memory. Maybe they talk about a vacation you supposedly took with them, yet you're positive you spent that summer elsewhere. They might wave it off, claiming you must have forgotten, but there's a conviction in their tone that they truly remember you there. So who's mistaken? Could they be experiencing a ghost from their timeline? Or are you? Some interpret these anomalies in a grand sense. Parallel realities likely exist, separated from ours by quantum differences or cosmic forks in the timeline. Normally, these branches don't intersect, but certain conditions might cause slight overlaps, like a glass plate pressed against another, letting you see a faint reflection from the other side. During that overlap, objects or memories slip across, manifesting briefly in your timeline before the rift seals. If you happen to encounter them, you come away with tangible confusion. It could be a dusty old ring in your attic that your mother says never existed, or a paragraph in a history textbook that later disappears, replaced by the standard account. By the time you circle back to document it, it's reverted to normal, leaving only your recollection of the anomaly. Most people would blame misprint or misremembering, but you can't shake the sense that you caught a genuine bleed-through from another reality. Ghosts of alternate realities differ from illusions in that they sometimes carry a profound emotional weight. A mother might find a baby picture of her child wearing a shirt she's certain she never bought, or recall a family holiday that others deny took place. These details can unnerve you because they call into question foundational memories. If reality can shift such personal, sentimental anchors, what remains stable? For that reason, encountering one of these ghosts is often more than a fleeting curiosity. It resonates deep in your sense of self, your identity interwoven with certain memories and physical mementos. If the timeline can rewrite these or swap them out, you risk feeling as if your own life story is built on quicksand. That existential unease is a hallmark of reality glitches. They aren't just anomalies to marvel at, but direct threats to your trust in continuity and stability. Another hallmark is how solitary these experiences tend to be. One day, you might find an old photograph in a shoebox showing a friend in a city they insist they never visited, but maybe they recall visiting a city you never remember them mentioning. You try cross-referencing flight records or social media posts to figure out the truth, but they come up blank. Neither of you can produce conclusive evidence for your respective memories. The photo might vanish before you can scan it, or you scan it only to have the file show up corrupt. No matter how many times it happens, it remains tantalizingly unprovable. You start to wonder if that's the nature of these alternate reality ghosts. Ephemeral evidence that defies objective verification, as though some cosmic failsafe cleans up any glaring contradictions. Naturally, a lot of onlookers roll their eyes, chalking it all up to poor recollection or random coincidences in old keepsakes. But the difference is often one of intensity. People who've experienced these ghosts speak of a vivid clarity, a jolt of recognition that an item or event doesn't match the known timeline. It's not like noticing a small error in your memory. It feels sharper, accompanied by that subtle electric shock reminiscent of a supernatural haunting. You know something has intruded that shouldn't be here, or something normal has been replaced by an alien detail from elsewhere. And once you see it, you can't help feeling that your version of reality is, in fact, not the only one. A parallel branch might be breathing down your neck, leaving footprints that only you notice. There's a sort of cosmic romance to it, in a sense. Even if it's unsettling, there's also a wonder in imagining that your world is layered with near-identical copies, each diverging in some small or large ways. You might, for instance, recall a time your hometown had a different name or a different layout, but no one else does. A local diner you used to frequent might be missing, replaced by a different business that, in your mind, only just arrived. Or you open a map from decades ago and see a highway that never existed in your official timeline, only to check it again later and find the page changed, as if your eyes deceived you. These illusions, if illusions they be, carry an aura of half-remembered dreams. If they are illusions, they're illusions that coordinate with uncanny precision to make you question the entire nature of historical records. Some tie these experiences to the concept of timeline merges or splits, imagining that entire populations might occasionally shift from one reality track to another. The glitch arises when an individual retains leftover knowledge or physical relics from the prior branch, but that leftover is either ephemeral or reabsorbed by the new reality. You may have a t-shirt from a concert that, in this timeline, was cancelled, so the shirt ceases to exist after a day. By the time you try to prove you had it, you find your drawer empty. Is that truly a timeline shift or just a bizarre way your memory covers for a missing item? The logic can get murky, yet the anecdotal consistency in how these ghosts appear is striking. They materialize briefly, sow confusion, then fade away, leaving behind only baffled recollections. In online communities devoted to reality glitches, these ghost stories are among the most emotionally charged, because they often involve personal or sentimental matters. People talk about discovering a note from a deceased relative containing references to events that didn't happen in your recognized timeline. Or maybe you meet someone who insists you share a childhood experience that you have no recollection of, and they seem genuinely confused that you can't remember. The heartbreak emerges from realizing that there's some version of you, or them, who did share that experience, just not in this official record of reality. The line between nostalgia and cosmic displacement blurs, pushing you into existential reevaluation of how stable your life story truly is. One might compare these ephemeral artifacts to poltergeists that come and go, except, again, it's not about an afterlife or spirit, rather a fleeting cross-contamination of timelines. If you try to adopt a purely psychological lens, you might argue it's all personal confabulation, group misremembering, or false memories triggered by suggestion. But those who experience it viscerally find that explanation lacking in emotional weight. They claim the clarity of these glimpses is more intense than a random memory slip. It's as though they're forcibly shown a piece of reality they're not meant to see, a leftover from some parallel domain, only for reality to quickly retract it. Others embrace a simulation narrative. Maybe the system accidentally loaded data from an alternate save file. Regardless of the explanation, the emotional resonance is the same, a potent mix of awe, fear, and curiosity. Sometimes people trade these ghost stories face-to-face, testing if others have had anything similar. You find clusters of stories in certain small towns, suggesting that maybe local or older realms are more prone to timeline bleed-through. Or it could be that in older places, artifacts get lost, leaving more room for confusion. Possibly it's just that weird events are more noticeable in quieter locales. In any case, the pattern persists. Ephemeral sightings of buildings, letters, or references that vanish upon second glance. A portion of glitch enthusiasts mention traveling outside their usual routines, like on a road trip or an unfamiliar train route, when they witness a ghost of an alternate reality. Perhaps it's easier to catch these anomalies when you're not locked into your standard commute, so you pay more attention to odd details. At the end of the day, there's no definitive answer to what these ghost phenomena truly are. Many remain resolutely skeptical, attributing them to overactive imaginations, mislabeled items, or conflated memories. But for those who have lived through a moment where the official timeline and their personal recollection clash in some impossible way, like a friend not remembering an entire day's outing that you both apparently took, well, that moment lingers. It feels heavier than a misremembered brand name or a trivial confusion. It suggests that large portions of your life story might have had fleeting tangents in parallel branches, tangents that no longer exist here. Calling them ghosts feels apt, because like phantoms, they quietly manifest, unsettling your assumptions, then fade without leaving obvious proof. And there's the rub. Lack of proof keeps these stories on the fringe. If you did manage to hold onto a photograph or letter from an alternate timeline, you'd have a spectacular piece of evidence, right? Yet the anecdotal accounts say it never stays put. The artifact either morphs or disappears, or you never manage to document it in time. That ephemeral quality is precisely what makes them so haunting. You can't easily share them with the world, so each ghost remains a private or small group riddle, fueling the sense that reality might be riddled with hidden overlaps. In that sense, the phenomenon retains a ghostly hush, publicly unacknowledged, yet quietly weaving through the experiences of those who stumble onto it. If we try to glean a lesson from such encounters, perhaps it's that we shouldn't take the official version of history or memory for granted. The stable veneer of timeline and place might be just that, a veneer. Beneath it lies a labyrinth of branching possibilities, normally sealed off from each other but prone to slight leaks or merges. The fleeting evidence of these merges is what we label as these ghosts of alternate realities. Their realities whisper that everything we consider true could be local to this branch, and that other branches are equally real yet normally out of sight. That notion is both electrifying and disorienting, resonating with the fundamental wonder behind all reality glitches. Maybe the world is not the singular, continuous domain we learned about in school, but an interlaced field of multiple timelines that occasionally brush against each other like spectral ships passing in the night. For some, this realization becomes a call to loosen their grip on rigid certainty. They grow more comfortable with ambiguity, seeing life as layered, each layer possibly housing its own set of facts. Others find it deeply disturbing, as if they can't trust their own memories or relics. Either reaction underscores how powerful and disruptive these ghost glimpses can be. They may be subtle, just a single photograph, a single conversation, a single oddly persistent recollection, but their implications cut to the core of how we define reality's boundaries. And in that sense, they remain among the most compelling forms of reality glitches. Quiet but existentially loaded, ephemeral but deeply meaningful for those who encounter them, and forever resisting neat explanations that would let us tuck them away as mere curiosities of the mind. Quantum strangeness in daily life. Quantum mechanics is notorious for its mind-bending implications. Particles existing in fuzzy superpositions, entangled partners influencing each other instantly from light years away, waves collapsing under the gaze of an observer. We're taught that these bizarre phenomena belong in specialized labs or in the invisible realm of subatomic particles, far removed from the ordinary world of cats, coffee cups, and commutes. Yet for many, there are those uncanny, everyday moments that feel so wildly improbable or strangely synchronized that it's tempting to wonder if quantum weirdness isn't lurking behind the scenes of daily life. Maybe it's a coincidence too precise to dismiss, or a fleeting sense that reality itself momentarily flickered, echoing how a wave function collapses when someone finally measures it. Even if mainstream science says large-scale quantum states are demolished by decoherence long before they reach our eyes, the allure of quantum thinking in everyday contexts remains potent, whispering that the same forces that mystify physicists might just peek through the cracks of our routines more often than we realize. Consider the countless tiny events each day that could, in principle, have played out differently if even a single microscopic detail had changed. A random breeze shifts your path at the last second, causing you to avoid a near collision. Or you receive a message from an old friend precisely at the moment you think about them. Something so sharply timed that it feels like more than chance. One explanation is that it's purely statistical fluke or your mind's pattern-seeking bias. But another explanation, more whimsical, sees in it the faint presence of quantum-style probability. A sense that multiple outcomes hovered in superposition before one snapped into being, as if a cosmic observer effect shaped which reality you ended up with. It's not that you can replicate these micro-episodes in a double-slit experiment, but their improbable nature resonates with the quantum principle that outcomes aren't locked in until final measurement. Talk to some glitch enthusiasts, and you'll hear stories of uncanny alignment they ascribe to everyday entanglement. They describe thinking intently about a concept or object, then encountering it in the wild moments later in a way that defies normal explanation. They interpret this as a real correlation bridging mental states and external events, akin to quantum entanglement bridging two photon spins. Of course, standard physics insists these human-scale correlations are either random or explained by subliminal cues. Still, for the person experiencing them, it can feel profoundly synchronous, leading them to invoke the quantum sense of spooky action at a distance. They might also suggest that consciousness, like an observer in a lab, collapses certain outcomes into reality just by focusing on them. A mainstream scientist typically calls that a metaphor, not a literal effect, but the conceptual parallel exerts a strong psychological grip. The theme of observer effect is particularly tempting in daily contexts. In quantum mechanics, measuring or observing a particle's position forces it to adopt a definite state. So the question arises, might your attention or conscious awareness subtly shape outcomes beyond your immediate interactions, as though you're continually choosing from multiple parallel possibilities simply by observing? People might claim that objects or scenarios remain undetermined until they actively check. One anecdotal example might be rummaging around for an item you can't find, only to locate it the moment you stop searching and glance aimlessly. Some interpret that as a comedic wave function collapse. As long as you're looking, the item remains unmanifest, superposed among many possible locations, and it only decides a final location once you give up. While most of us see that as psychological irony, a quantum-inspired viewpoint reframes it as an everyday observer effect, an intangible but delightful notion that your observation finalizes reality's details. Elsewhere, people latch on to the concept of entanglement to explain intangible emotional or psychic links. You're in a random city, you sense a strong pang of a friend's emotions, and then discover they had a crisis at that exact moment. Skeptics label it coincidence or selective memory. Yet a quantum-flavored interpretation imagines that just as two photons can remain correlated even after traveling across the galaxy, so might two individuals maintain a hidden link that transmits states in ways we can't measure. It's certainly a leap from lab entanglement to emotional synergy, but psychologically it offers a seductive explanation for those spooky, same wavelength moments we share with loved ones. It also feels more captivating than simply calling it a fluke. We can't ignore, of course, that literal quantum experiments require pristine isolation and small scales. The slightest environmental interaction tends to destroy quantum coherence. By the time you scale up to living organisms, let alone entire daily experiences, decoherence is huge. That's why scientists remain skeptical that wave functions remain uncollapsed in the macro realm. But for those open to glitch perspectives, the improbability of daily coincidences can still serve as a hint that quantum phenomena might occasionally persist in unrecognized ways, or that reality as a whole follows deeper quantum-like principles. Maybe the classical world is just a stable emergent facade, while fundamental unpredictability still seeps in around the edges, producing the improbable or miraculous once in a while. There's also the notion of quantum leaps in personal decisions, how you might shift from indecision to a sudden new choice with no apparent intermediate step. People sometimes say they feel themselves pop from one mental state to another. While standard psychology can explain that as a normal shift in neural processes, a quantum perspective frames it as your mind occupying superposed states of potential decisions until wave function collapse yields a final outcome. Again, it's not rigorous physics, but it underscores how quantum metaphors shape how we talk about leaps in logic or creativity. Some artists or inventors describe breakthroughs as though a swirl of possibilities hovered in their imagination, all existing simultaneously, until a eureka moment pinned down the solution. The parallels to quantum superposition are obvious. For a moment, Multiple concepts are true, then suddenly only one emerges as the reality you adopt. In more exotic corners, you find adherents to quantum jumping or reality shifting techniques, claiming you can literally jump timelines by focusing your intent. They see the many worlds interpretation, which posits that each quantum event spawns branching universes, as an invitation for conscious minds to choose which branch they end up in. If you wholeheartedly visualize a reality where you're, say, in better health or in a different job, you might step into that timeline. That might sound far-fetched from a scientific perspective. There's no recognized mechanism for navigating branches. But it resonates with how open quantum interpretations remain. People cite anecdotal success stories, pointing out small environmental or personal changes they attribute to timeline jumps. Is it imaginative self-fulfilling prophecy? Or is there a deeper phenomenon? Hard to pin down, but the conceptual synergy between quantum ideas and everyday transformations keeps fueling interest. Another aspect of quantum weirdness in daily life is the fascination with how particles don't really exist in a single place until measured, reminiscent of illusions we experience in daily perception. For instance, we might see how attention can change what we notice or recall, effectively creating aspects of an experience only once we focus on them. That subjectivity evokes quantum's non-deterministic stance. Maybe the reason we see so many improbable events or coincidences is that we typically aren't noticing all the alternatives that never fully manifest. Just like in the double-slit experiment, the wave function includes multiple paths, but we only observe one final pattern after measurement. In a daily sense, we might guess that life is a swirl of near-infinite partial outcomes, and we only witness a single thread, albeit with occasional signs that the other threads were there. This can tie into theories about reality glitches, as if some alternative branches briefly intrude. It's also worth bringing up quantum biology again, which, though not mainstreamly proven for large organisms, suggests that certain life processes, like photosynthesis or avian magnetoreception, may exploit quantum coherence. If that's the case, then daily life is not wholly classical. Many living systems rely on partial quantum phenomena to function efficiently, even if they quickly localize at the macro scale. That knowledge alone can color your perspective of the natural world. Next time you see a bird gracefully pivot mid-flight or watch a plant capturing sunlight with miraculous efficiency, you might recall that quantum states, ephemeral and delicate, might be at work under the hood. From that vantage, daily life itself, a swirl of interactions between living creatures, hides pockets of quantum strangeness that never fully vanish. You might ask, does any of this yield real, replicable evidence that quantum states linger in your living room or your social interactions? Probably not in any standard scientific sense, but it can cultivate a sense of cosmic wonder, a willingness to see improbable events as subtle echoes of how nature truly operates at the deepest level. Instead of dismissing bizarre synchronicities or improbable alignments as mere coincidences, people who embrace quantum metaphors find in them a reflection of the fundamental unpredictability that defines the subatomic realm. They might argue that every day is a grand superposition of possible experiences, collapsing into the single storyline you call today. Such a worldview can be empowering or disorienting. On one hand, it breaks your reliance on a deterministic mechanical universe, hinting that things remain open, vibrant, and shaped by intangible factors, like your attention or random quantum flickers in the vacuum. On the other, it can unmoor you from common sense, risking illusions of control over random events or illusions of cosmic specialness in every trivial coincidence. That's the tightrope. Quantum strangeness can inspire new humility and wonder, but taken too literally, it might lead to a confusion between metaphor and factual mechanism. Still, many find the imaginative synergy worthwhile. It stirs us to see everyday life as more mysterious, recalling how quantum mechanics dismantled classical logic and replaced it with probability, wave functions, and entangled states that defy local realism. Perhaps the greatest gift of quantum strangeness in daily life is how it reminds us that reality, behind the practical facade, is brimming with the uncanny. Each time you marvel at an improbable event or fleeting synchronicity, you're resonating with a deeper truth. Nature at its core is an unpredictable interplay of probabilities. On large scales, that interplay usually averages out, giving us stable classical objects and consistent cause and effect. But once in a while, a confluence of microprobabilities can produce a scenario so bizarre that it hints at the quantum weirdness shaping the fundamental tapestry. We might never measure a cat in two states at once or literally watch entangled dice rolls across continents, but the conceptual skeleton of quantum mechanics, non-local correlations, superpositions, observer impacts, can color how we interpret those improbable moments that jolt us from routine. After all, if quantum mechanics underlies everything, then in principle the entire daily stage is built on quantum bedrock, full of hidden waves and ephemeral coherence that usually remain in the background. Maybe daily life is peppered with glimpses of that subatomic wonderland more often than we realize. Even the simple act of existence, electrons repelling each other so your hand doesn't pass through a wall, relies on quantum principles. If at times we forget that, it's because we operate at a macro scale that rarely exhibits quantum behaviors. But the possibility that some ephemeral quantum influences or chance correlations can bubble to the surface in everyday contexts is a seductive idea. It merges science with a dash of magic, bridging the micro-realm's known oddities with the intangible mysteries we experience every day. Ultimately, whether these feelings and coincidences are truly quantum in nature or just poetic analogies doesn't diminish their impact. They expand your sense of possibility, reminding you that the cosmos is deeper and stranger than your day planner and grocery list let on. In a sense, quantum mechanics is the ultimate rebel against classical normalcy, and letting its rebellious spirit infuse your everyday lens can be a form of living more awake to the improbable, more attuned to the ephemeral, and more open to the unexpected. That, at heart, might be the real gift of quantum strangeness in daily life. Not literal wave function collapses on your kitchen counter, but a refreshing re-enchantment of the mundane, fueled by the knowledge that beneath every solid object and each neat outcome, the quantum haze still pulses, shaping reality in ways that exceed common sense, and perhaps occasionally shining through in the form of improbable events, eerie synchronicities, or small glitches that remind you how fundamentally weird our universe is. Random coincidences or hidden codes. Random coincidences. You're walking down the street, heading nowhere special, when suddenly you catch a glimpse of something that snaps your mind awake. A license plate on a passing car that spells out the very word you were just thinking about. It might be your own name, or maybe it's a strange term you were idly mulling over in your head. You stop in your tracks, a mild shock running through your nerves. What are the odds? You ask yourself, half amused, half spooked. A rational voice in you chimes in. Just chance, that's all. And yet you can't fully dismiss the uncanny thrill. Some part of you wonders if it's more than coincidence, like someone or something out there is sending you a cryptic message, weaving events into patterns too precise to be accidental. This question, whether improbable events are merely random or clues to hidden codes, has troubled and fascinated people for centuries. We're a species wired to see patterns. That's no secret. From spotting predators in the rustling of leaves to interpreting constellations in the night sky, detecting meaning in random data is a hallmark of our cognition. Sometimes it saves our lives. Sometimes it leads us astray, conjuring illusions where none exist. So perhaps it's only natural that we'd see random coincidences in everyday life and wonder if they might be hidden codes. Pieces of a grand puzzle we only notice when everything lines up too perfectly. The tension lies in how improbable events can appear, and how persistent the feeling can be that something orchestrated them. If you've ever experienced a coincidence so outrageous it leaves your jaw hanging, you know that logical explanations about probability can ring hollow. Sure, you can intellectually accept that with billions of people and events unfolding constantly, weird alignments are inevitable. But your gut rebels, whispering that you glimpsed an underlying design. Examples abound. People talk about how they'll think of a specific old friend they haven't contacted in years, and at that exact moment, that friend reaches out via text. Or they'll open a book to a random page and find it discussing something they were passionately debating just minutes ago. They'll run into the same stranger multiple times in random contexts that make no sense, or see an exact sequence of repeating numbers everywhere. In receipts, timestamps, license plates, phone calls. Over time, the sense of wait, this can't just be random grows. Some folks enjoy it as a cosmic game. The universe is winking at me. Others can become unsettled, feeling as though they're living in some intricate matrix of illusions, or that an unseen intelligence is toying with them. Critics of the hidden code stance emphasize the laws of large numbers. The more events that happen, the more chance you have of stumbling upon improbable alignments. If you think about a friend, that friend might randomly decide to call you at the same time. Someone somewhere is bound to have that synchronicity, simply by the volume of daily interactions across the globe. Probability dictates that the bizarre will inevitably occur once in a while, and we only pay attention to the hits, ignoring the multitude of misses. That's the classic explanation for how psychic coincidences can feel so freakish but ultimately be lumps in the statistical gravy. A skeptic finds comfort in that. It's just math. But from the vantage of someone experiencing a jaw-dropping alignment, the purely statistical argument feels incomplete. They might concede that it's not proof of anything supernatural, but the emotional resonance lingers. It's like glimpsing a seam in reality, seeing how ephemeral cause and effect can appear. Even if you know intellectually that with millions of others around, improbable events must happen, it doesn't diminish the personal sense that your event is special, a hint at some underlying structure. That's why the debate persists, the tension between rational arguments about probability and the gut-level conviction that you've witnessed something extraordinary. Historically, we find countless tales of uncanny coincidences. Authors have discovered that obscure details in their fiction come true, or diaries mention dreams that match future global events in eerie detail. Take stories like Morgan Robertson's novella Futility, published in 1898, about a massive ocean liner named Titan sinking in the North Atlantic, striking parallels to the Titanic disaster 14 years later. It's easy to say he was just writing about a plausible maritime accident, and the real Titanic event turned it into a prophecy. Yet many people read that as more than chance. That's the root question. Random coincidence or a hidden code in which the future slipped into a writer's mind? Another example might be a comedic sketch that accurately predicted some bizarre political outcome, later actualized in the real world. One can argue it's guesswork that happened to be right. Still, the sense of orchestrated pattern is compelling. It's even more striking on a personal level. You might rummage in an attic and find a dusty letter that describes a genealogical link you never knew you had, matching exactly the conversation you'd had the previous day about looking into your family tree. Or you might see a random word scrawled on a bench, only to come home and find that same obscure word on a page of a book you open at random. Mere coincidence, the skeptic insists. But how many such moments does it take before you suspect the cosmic background might be peppering your reality with signposts? Some find these signposts reassuring, as if the universe is confirming you're on the right track or paying attention. Others find them unnerving, worried that their free will or sense of normal cause and effect might be compromised by an invisible puzzle they never agreed to. One might ask, if these coincidences were truly coded messages, who's sending them? A typical glitch worldview might say that it's not about a who, but a what, like we're in a simulation or a cosmic web of meaning that bleeds through the mundane. Alternatively, a more spiritual stance might say God or universal consciousness gently arranges these synchronicities as breadcrumbs. Or we might see it as the universe's inherent oneness manifesting in small, improbable bursts of unity. None of this can be proven, of course, so it's more about personal interpretation than a testable phenomenon. But the fact that so many people across cultures and times have reported these uncanny alignments suggests it's woven into the human experience. We may not have an official scientific measure for how improbable is too improbable before calling it design. But we do have the capacity to sense when probability alone feels inadequate. There's also the perspective that not all coincidences have the same flavor. Some are minor amusements, like wearing the same outfit as a coworker 2 days in a row. Others are so staggering that they upend your sense of reality. You might be traveling overseas to a small village and meet someone who shares your obscure last name and has a birthmark identical to your grandfather's. Or you find a random novel describing an event that almost exactly matches a personal tragedy you lived through, including obscure details. The deeper the improbability, the stronger the leaning toward hidden code. This gradient suggests that perhaps it's not an all-or-nothing scenario. Maybe many coincidences are just noise, but a rare few might reflect something deeper. That's precisely what glitch enthusiasts claim, that when coincidences escalate beyond the realm of typical improbability, you're glimpsing a glitch in an underlying system. It's akin to seeing repeated digits in the code, letting you suspect a pattern in the matrix. Another dimension is how these coincidences often revolve around meaningful content for the observer. You rarely get excited if random data lines up around dull or irrelevant topics. It's the personal relevance that charges it with significance. Carl Jung used the term synchronicity to describe these meaningful coincidences that can't be explained purely by cause and effect. In Jung's view, synchronistic events carry psychological or symbolic weight, bridging the external world and your internal state in a way that challenges standard notions of linear causation. Whether you interpret that as a genuine universal principle or a psychological trick is up to you, but many find that synchronicity captures the phenomenon of it's not just random stuff, it's random stuff that resonates with me precisely when I need it or can't ignore it. That resonance amplifies the sense of hidden code, as if life's events become tailor-made messages. Still, the skeptic in you might wonder, if these coincidences were truly coded, why do they seldom yield direct instructions or unambiguous revelations? They can feel like half-finished riddles, fleeting nudges with no official explanation. You see a sequence of your childhood address in random places after a major life decision, but it doesn't necessarily solve any pressing question or convey a coherent sentence. It might just be a whisper. Some interpret this as the code's subtlety. You can't read it like a linear text. You have to glean hints of alignment and trust your intuition about what they mean. Others see it as evidence that we're imposing meaning on random data. Yet that tension is exactly what keeps the conversation alive. Coincidences are rarely so blatant as to be undeniable, but rarely so trivial as to be easy to dismiss. People might accumulate anecdotal evidence, from diaries brimming with examples, to entire websites dedicated to improbable stories, fueling a sense of cosmic puzzle solving. But we lack a universal yardstick to measure the threshold of improbability that crosses from random to must-be design. Probability experts, armed with mathematics, can try to show how even a seemingly once-in-a-lifetime alignment can be accounted for by large sample sizes and selection biases. On the other hand, the type of person who meticulously logs every improbable event might notice patterns that no statistic can easily wave off, especially if there's a thematic or symbolic cohesion. For example, maybe the same rare name or phrase appears in multiple unrelated contexts over a short span, culminating in a dream, an unexpected phone call, and a chance meeting that revolve around that same name. You can spin a theory of random happenstance, sure, but at some point the raw emotional impact of "this is following me" might overshadow rational disclaimers. Another vantage is to ask whether these hidden codes could be illusions conjured by our unconscious. We might unconsciously manipulate events or choose vantage points that produce the coincidences. For instance, you might only recall the times your phone beeped exactly when you thought of your friend, ignoring the countless times it didn't. This psychological effect is real and can inflate the significance of coincidences. But does that fully explain cases where the alignment is incredibly detailed or repeated across multiple contexts? Perhaps so, perhaps not. The puzzle endures because we don't have a foolproof method to replicate such events on demand. Coincidences remain ephemeral, personal mysteries. Often, we see a moral or emotional component in how people interpret random versus coded. If you're going through a rough patch and you keep stumbling on coincidences that bring comfort or hope, it's tempting to read them as supportive messages from a benevolent cosmic source. Conversely, if you have a negative outlook, you might see the same coincidences as ominous warnings or cosmic jokes at your expense. The code, if real, is ambiguous enough that it can reflect your emotional lens. That's a big reason these phenomena have a subjective hold. They adapt to your personal narrative, intensifying the sense that it's meant for you. In a bigger sense, random coincidences or hidden codes is almost a microcosm of how we approach reality at large. Are we living in a neutral, indifferent universe that sometimes spawns bizarre matches of events? Or are we part of a tapestry laced with purposeful patterns that we mostly fail to notice until something dramatic lines up? The question doesn't stop at trivial everyday happenings. Some interpret entire historical arcs or genealogical lines as loaded with improbable parallels, concluding that humankind is subject to a hidden script. Others remain convinced that it's all a product of retroactive pattern spotting. We find parallels only after the fact, ignoring the infinite stories or genealogies that exhibit no special alignments. Consider the possibility that we're in a simulated environment. Then coincidences might be artifacts of code reusability, like a random number generator glitch or a storyline function that unintentionally merges datasets. This merges the glitch perspective with the code perspective. Maybe every improbable alignment is a slip revealing the subroutines behind your daily illusions. While that's an intriguing notion, it's still speculation. The universe as code scenario has no direct confirmation, yet it fits neatly with the sense that repeated improbable alignments might be debugging messages, so to speak. For some, that's more believable than the idea that a random universe simply spat out these insane coincidences on the daily. For others, that's an imaginative leap with no proof, though the argument might run, but can we prove the purely random explanation, either? As you see, the debate thrives on the ambiguous nature of coincidences. They're personal, unrepeatable, and ephemeral, defying controlled study. So each person resolves it individually, guided by personal inclination or worldview. Some will say, I prefer an enchanting cosmos, so I'll see these events as coded. Others will say, I prefer a rational cosmos, so I accept that improbable alignments are statistically inevitable. The difference is rarely about logic alone, since, ironically, logic can't fully quell or confirm your personal sense of wonder. One might advise a middle road. Treat coincidences as potential signposts, but don't become dogmatic about them. They might indeed be random, yet even if they are, they can be psychologically or spiritually meaningful. Humans find meaning in everything from star constellations to Rorschach ink blots, so finding meaning in daily events that line up improbably might be an extension of that. Meaning is real to us, even if it's subjective. Alternatively, some adopt the standpoint that we might never know if it's truly a cosmic code, so we might as well glean inspiration from it if it helps us navigate life. If the coincidences yield beneficial insights or spark gratitude, then from a psychological perspective, they serve a positive function. That doesn't prove them to be anything more than chance, but it underscores that our experience of them can be valuable. Conversely, going too far down the everything is coded path can lead to paranoia or a sense that you're being manipulated by an unseen force. People sometimes report anxiety upon noticing that every random alignment might be a message. If you see recurring warnings in numbers, you might interpret them as threats from an unknown realm, or if you see repeated references to a certain tragedy, you might live in dread. So your emotional reaction to hidden codes can shape whether you see them as comforting or ominous. That's why some remain neutral, acknowledging that improbable events happen but refusing to interpret them as either random or coded, letting them remain a puzzle without forcing an interpretation. In a broader cultural sense, one reason we're fascinated by coincidences is that they challenge the dryness of a purely mechanistic worldview. We crave magic or wonder in daily life. Coincidences that align with your personal narrative or sense of identity can feel magical, an injection of serendipity that breathes new life into the mundane. They also breed good stories. You'll never believe what happened to me today. So ironically, coincidences become self-reinforcing. People love telling them, hearing them, and archiving them, thereby preserving the phenomenon in collective memory. The dull or trivial non-events vanish, and we're left with a curated anthology of holy cow stories, fueling the hidden code hypothesis. Ultimately, the question of random coincidences or hidden codes might have no final resolution, only an ongoing tension. By the strictest measure, everything can be explained in principle by randomness plus psychological biases. But that doesn't negate the personal, sometimes transformative, impact of these events. If you find them spiritual or interpret them as messages that guide your decisions, you might live a more wonder-filled life, albeit stepping into territory that mainstream rational thought leaves behind. If you dismiss them, you're safe from illusions but might forfeit a certain sense of enchantment that can color existence with deeper significance. So the choice might hinge on how you want to navigate your subjective experience of the world. Nevertheless, the phenomenon itself, coincidences that startle us with their precision, remains an undeniable facet of the human condition. Whether purely random or partly coded, they show how events can converge in ways that defy easy classification, reminding us that life can still surprise us at every turn. Even if we can't prove hidden codes, the raw experience of improbable alignment rattles our intellectual cages, suggesting that behind the everyday churn of cause and effect lies something either so vast and random it inevitably produces illusions of pattern, or so mysteriously structured that it can insert meaningful echoes just to see if we notice. And noticing is exactly what we do. We collect these stories, scratch our heads, and re-experience that shiver of wonder. Thus, each improbable coincidence stands as an ambassador of possibility, bridging the gap between a mechanical cosmos and a cosmos alive with hidden design. We can't know for sure which side is correct, random or coded, but in the act of confronting such coincidences, we reaffirm that reality, whether purely stochastic or guided by clandestine signals, is never as straightforward as we might assume. Perhaps the most balanced approach is to remain curious. Greet each mind-boggling alignment with both awe and caution, acknowledging the power of probability and the legitimate potential for deeper patterns. Either way, these improbable collisions of events keep pushing us to question how certain we are about anything. If everything is random, it's staggering how often randomness mimics meaning. If it's coded, it's equally staggering that the code so deftly straddles the line between the hidden and the revealed, daring us to wonder if everything we call coincidence might be a cryptic note from the heart of the universe, waiting for someone to read it. Time slips and déjà vus. Time slips and déjà vus both revolve around the eerie feeling that our usual flow of past, present, and future might not be as fixed or linear as we believe. We tend to move through life assuming time marches forward in tidy order, never doubling back or overlapping. Yet many people have experienced the disturbing sensation that they momentarily popped out of that steady march, whether by jumping to an earlier point, replaying a snippet of time, or seeing a preview of events before they happen. These moments can be subtle, lasting only a few seconds, or they might be dramatic enough to make you wonder if you've stepped into an alternate dimension. They're generally classified into two related phenomena: time slips, in which you feel you've literally slid to another point in the timeline or had the timeline rearranged around you, and déjà vus, in which you have a jarring certainty that you're reliving the exact moment you're currently experiencing. Both question the neat boundaries of time we rely on, hinting that maybe our lives aren't as chronologically stable as we like to think. The simplest example is the classic déjà vu, the uncanny impression that you've been here in this exact situation before. Perhaps you're talking with a friend in a new cafe, hearing them utter a sentence you'd swear you've heard from them before. Same tone, same context, same surrounding details. Logically, you know it can't have happened, but your body bristles with recognition. The next moment, it's gone, leaving you disoriented. Psychological explanations suggest that déjà vu might be a misfiring in the brain, where short and long-term memory signals get briefly scrambled. Another take says we might be glimpsing a parallel timeline or recalling a dream that precisely depicted this event. In glitch circles, déjà vu is championed as evidence that reality can indeed repeat or that we might be out of sync with the normal flow of time, catching a small replay. While rational science sees a neural quirk, the felt experience goes deeper. You truly believe you've been through this instant before, almost like time momentarily looped. Time slips, in contrast, are often described as more overt incidents. You might be driving a familiar route, then realize that you arrived at your destination in half the normal time, with no memory of the intervening stretch. Some interpret it as lost time, like the clock jumped forward or you teleported over a portion of the road. Others talk about gaining time, noticing that a supposedly hour-long trek took only minutes on the clock. In extreme stories, people claim to slip back years in time, if only for a few bewildering minutes. They'll wander into a store that looks antiquated, speak with employees wearing old-fashioned attire, then leave and notice everything's normal again. Or they check the date on a newspaper and find it's decades off, only to recheck moments later and see the current date. Are these illusions or illusions plus memory anomalies? Possibly. But for those who experience them, the sense of stepping outside standard chronology can be overwhelming. One famous category is the vanishing building scenario. You recall seeing a particular building that day, only to discover that by official records, that building was demolished years ago. or you remember a stretch of road differently than it appears the next time you pass through. The glitch perspective might say you briefly time-slipped into an older or alternate version of that location before snapping back. Another form is the time loop. You catch yourself replaying the same conversation or the same series of events, as though time rewound 30 seconds and forced you to repeat them. Typically, these loops are small, leaving you scratching your head. Did it actually happen, or did you just get confused? If it truly repeated, how did your memory remain intact while everyone else carried on unaware? Then there's Deja Vu's lesser-known cousin, Deja Vu, a more intense version where you feel not just that the moment is familiar, but that you know exactly what's going to happen next, like a partial premonition. Sometimes you do predict the next words out of someone's mouth or the next sudden event, deepening the suspicion that time might not be as linear as we suppose. People debate whether that's purely an illusion or if you momentarily gleaned knowledge from a future vantage. Similarly, there's Jamais Vu, the opposite phenomenon, where familiar surroundings suddenly feel utterly alien, as though you've never seen them before. While psychologists tie it to memory confusion, glitch enthusiasts see it as evidence that you hop to a parallel timeline where that location is brand new to you. What's intriguing is how these experiences commonly evoke dread or awe. You might stand in your living room for a second, thoroughly convinced you've somehow rerun the last few minutes, and a chill climbs your spine. Or you notice the digital clock skipping forward, skipping backward, or showing a time that can't be correct, only to revert when you look again. Our minds recoil because time is the bedrock ordering principle of life. If it can glitch, what else is up for grabs? That sudden breakdown of temporal continuity can be more unsettling than seeing a physical anomaly. Physical illusions may be dismissed more easily, but the sense that your entire timeline might waver unsettles your identity. After all, your memories define who you are, so if time is flexible, does that rewrite your personal history? Some go so far as to interpret these events through metaphysical or simulation lenses, where time is part of a coded system rather than an absolute dimension. If we are in a grand computational environment, maybe small errors in rendering can cause timeline overlaps or partial resets. That might explain both déjà vu, the system reloading a scene, and time slips, the system skipping a chunk of code or accidentally reusing data from an older state. Another spin is from the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics, suggesting that you hopped briefly onto a neighboring branch of reality, then hopped back, explaining why you saw or did something that no one else acknowledges. This framework merges well with broader glitch beliefs, like maybe each bizarre event is a clue that the cosmos is made of layered timelines. Yet it's important to note standard explanations exist, especially for déjà vu. Neurologists often say it occurs when the brain processes new sensory input as if it were already in memory, possibly caused by misfiring in temporal lobe circuits. That accounts for the fleeting sense of recognition. And while that might suffice for many fleeting déjà vu moments, it feels inadequate for the more extreme cases where you can accurately predict the next few seconds, or the time slips where the person claims entire hours or days behave strangely. Those more dramatic stories might be outliers or illusions, but they remain compelling for those who live through them, producing that hallmark sense of a glitch that no neat explanation can fully quell. Time slips can also be emotional. For instance, you might spontaneously get enveloped in memories of an event you're sure happened at a certain time, only to check diaries or photos and discover no record of it. You realize you can't place which year it occurred, as if your memory slid out of normal chronology. Or you get up in the morning convinced it's a day earlier or later than it actually is, feeling a deep conviction that yesterday didn't happen. Are these just absent-minded confusions or mild dissociative episodes? Possibly. Or are they mild forms of temporal displacement? People who believe in timeline merges might say you lived in alternate sequence and only partial fragments carried over, leading to that day-of-the-week confusion or memory mismatch. Could it be purely psychological? Sure. Yet the glitch perspective sees it as a real brush with alternate or broken time continuity. There are even stories of travelers who, upon visiting certain historical locations, claim to see them in their past glory, like glimpsing centuries ago architecture or hearing the bustle of an era long gone. By the time they snap out of it, everything reverts to the modern setting. Traditional folklore might label these episodes as hauntings or time ghosts, while a modern glitch viewpoint might say you literally time-slipped, or maybe your consciousness overlapped with a moment from a parallel timeline. Such stories are notoriously anecdotal, no stable evidence, but the individuals who experience them often speak with conviction about how vivid and real the details felt. A normal psychologist might see it as a vivid hallucination triggered by suggestion or emotional states, but again, for the witness, it often registers as something more authentic than a daydream. Likewise, advanced theoretical physics occasionally speculates about closed time-like curves or wormholes that in principle allow time travel, though none are confirmed feasible under real-world conditions. Nevertheless, the fact that modern science even entertains the possibility in theoretical form can embolden glitch hunters who report personal time slips. They ask, if physics can't rule it out, maybe these fleeting experiences are small-scale versions of such loops happening spontaneously? Skeptics answer that actual time travel or timeline messing would be far more disruptive and noticeable. Yet perhaps it can occur on a micro-scale, ephemeral and localized, leaving behind only confused recollections. Deja vu arguably sits on the lower end of the time anomaly scale, a subtle internal jolt. But what about recurring deja vu that spans entire weeks? Some rare cases see individuals trapped in a persistent feeling of reliving the present, describing every new day as if it's happening for the second or third time. That condition, known in psychological literature, can be quite distressing. In glitch terms, it's as though the time flow is stuck on repeat, or the subject is caught in a local time loop. The mainstream explanation is a pathological miscue in memory systems, yet from a glitch standpoint, maybe their personal timeline is glitching in slow motion. The intangible nature of time perception ensures we can't easily prove either theory, leaving the phenomenon afloat in an eerie dual narrative. And then there's the notion that time might not be a strict arrow at all, that past, present, and future coexist in a block universe, and we only perceive a slice at a time. Could déjà vus or time slips be fleeting glimpses of the entire block, crossing slices out of sequence? This is reminiscent of certain space-time interpretations in relativity, which suggest everything is laid out in a four-dimensional structure. Typically, we only see our now, but a glitch might let us momentarily sample a different slice or resample the same slice. It's not standard mainstream acceptance, but it does mirror the sense that these experiences hint at a deeper nonlinearity in reality. People sometimes connect time anomalies to personal stress or transitions, saying they happen more frequently during major life changes. Like the environment rewires itself under emotional pressure, letting cracks of alternate potential slip through. Or they occur in sacred or liminal spaces, places historically rumored to warp time. Old churches, ancient ruins, or deserted highways late at night. If the atmosphere is right, maybe your consciousness is more open to noticing time's odd behavior. Or, from a purely psychological vantage, it's your suggestibility that's heightened in these evocative settings. Either explanation shows how personal and contextual time slips or déjà vus can be, weaving into your emotional and situational states. Tying them to glitch theory is quite natural. Both time slips and déjà vus undermine the stable linear timeline we rely on. They're smaller than full-blown time travel, yet large enough to produce a crack in the conceptual walls of your day. After experiencing a strong déjà vu, you might pause, heart racing, scanning your surroundings to see if something bigger is amiss. Or after a time slip, you might anxiously check your watch or phone logs to confirm how much time passed. In some stories, people find clocks that reflect a different time from what they logically know must have elapsed, intensifying the puzzle. The phenomenon's ephemeral character ensures you rarely, if ever, gather objective proof. That's precisely the hallmark of a glitch. It upends your sense of normalcy without leaving behind a tidy data trail. As with other reality anomalies, the line between random neural or cognitive illusions and genuine cosmic oddities is fuzzy. Psychologists might be comfortable with the entire realm of déjà vu as a memory glitch, labeling more extreme time slip stories as confabulations or micro-blackouts. But the glitch viewpoint sees them as glimpses of a deeper truth about time's malleability, overshadowed by typical stable illusions that keep us sane. Possibly, each glitch is a minor meltdown in the rendering of the timeline, or each déjà vu is a micro-echo from an overlapping branch. Neither side can prove its stance conclusively. That's the tension that keeps time anomalies so compelling. To live with these phenomena is to hold a subtle question mark over your daily sense of chronology. You might catch a fleeting déjà vu while cooking dinner, feeling you've done this exact sequence in this exact emotional tone, though you're sure you never have. It rattles you, then passes. Or you might recall driving on a sunny day, only to realize the forecast that day was storms, and everyone else remembers the storm. If you bring it up, you'll likely get odd looks. So you're left with a private puzzle. That's how time slips and déjà vus often end. Personal riddles you either shrug off or incorporate into a worldview that acknowledges time might not be absolutely rigid. Does it mean time travel or parallel realities are real? Not necessarily, but it does mean your time slips and déjà vus both revolve around the eerie notion that our usual understanding of the past, present, and future may not be as locked in or unidirectional as it appears. We rely on time's linear flow for our sense of self, memory, and predictability, yet people worldwide report moments when that linearity seems to wobble, brief, disorienting episodes in which time either replays, jumps, or feels inexcusably out of sequence. In some cases, it's the classic déjà vu, an uncanny sensation that you've experienced this exact moment before in precise detail. In others, it's a full-fledged time slip. You might find yourself somehow transported to a different era for a few fleeting minutes. Or you look at the clock and realize less time or more time has passed than should be possible, as though you lost or gained blocks of reality. Both phenomena share a profound capacity to destabilize our everyday confidence in a smooth chronological march from past to future. Among these experiences, déjà vu is the more commonly discussed. Everyone at some point has felt that shock of recognition. Like you and your friend in that new cafe have already sat at this table, wearing these clothes, speaking these words, even though it's supposedly your first time here. Mainstream psychology explains déjà vu as a slip in memory processing. New sensory data becomes incorrectly tagged as something already stored, creating an instant of mistaken familiarity. But from a glitch perspective, that explanation doesn't always satisfy the force of the experience. Some déjà vu moments carry additional layers. Maybe you predict exactly what your friend will say next, or you recall minor details, like the color of a pen on the table, before actually seeing them. That can feel like a genuine time anomaly, as if you're accessing a loop or rerun in the timeline. Time slips, meanwhile, are often described as more overt and jarring. You might be driving a route that normally takes 20 minutes, then find yourself at your destination in less than half the usual time with no memory of having traveled those intervening roads. Or you walk into a shop you've known for years, but something about it seems old-fashioned, as if it's from decades in the past. When you leave and circle back, you can't find that old decor or any record that it was ever there. Some individuals even claim full-blown time travel episodes lasting minutes or hours, perceiving older fashions, older cars on the street, or people speaking in an antiquated dialect. Then, after some confusion, everything snaps back to the present. Typically, no external witness can confirm it, leaving the experiencer with a bizarre personal memory that feels more like a dream, yet far too vivid to dismiss. In broader glitch lore, these episodes converge with other reality anomalies. A time slip might momentarily overlap with an alternate branch of reality or a chunk of the past that didn't quite stay in its lane. Déjà vu could hint at micro loops in time, or at data from a parallel timeline leaking into your conscious awareness. Such theories are unprovable, of course, but they highlight how intimately our sense of self is tied to time. When time misbehaves, even slightly, it can feel more unsettling than a typical building glitch or brand name inconsistency. You might shrug off a weird memory of an alternate product logo, but a direct challenge to your personal timeline, like replaying the same minute or skipping over an hour, shakes you to your core. We structure our entire life story around a neat chronological progression. If that progression can glitch, how stable is your identity? One reason these experiences can be so disturbing is that they strike at memory's heart. If you spontaneously jump to a point in time that doesn't align with everyone else's clock, or you relive a scene, your memories of that event sit outside the normal continuity. Trying to share them with family or friends can be met with disbelief. You must have dozed off at the wheel, they might say, or maybe you're mixing up the date for that old shop. Such mundane explanations can feel too thin when the emotional intensity of your time slip was so real. People who've had these experiences often describe a quasi-liminal hush, a heightened sense that the environment is both familiar and alien, as though you are truly out of sync with the normal timeline. Then, the moment ends, you snap back to normal and you can't replicate it. A famous cluster of stories revolve around retrocausality, which posits that future events can somehow affect the past. On a small personal scale, it might manifest as a sudden, powerful déjà vu in which you recall details that truly haven't happened yet. But then they do. Or you realize you avoided an accident because you had a flash of the future event half a minute before it occurred, letting you step out of harm's way. Rational accounts might call it quick subconscious pattern recognition, but from a glitch standpoint, it's as if time for you momentarily reversed direction, letting future knowledge slip into your present. Such stories rarely provide photographic evidence or confirmable predictions. Time anomalies typically stay intangible, but they can transform your worldview once they happen to you. Sometimes, people see time anomalies forming a chain in their lives. Repeated déjà vu episodes that grow more intense, culminating in a full-blown time slip where they lose or gain hours. Or they keep having small day loops, where the same day's events appear to replay with slight variations, reminiscent of fictional time loop narratives, though less dramatic. For them, daily life becomes a puzzle. Am I stuck in a mini Groundhog Day scenario that only I notice? They might check the date or the exact phrasing of a conversation, only to find it differs from memory. Conventional psychology might label that confusion or microdream states. The glitch perspective says maybe you're witnessing time's script rewriting itself in real time. The sense of isolation can be profound, as time anomalies are rarely collective. Usually, it's just you perceiving it. Then there's the interplay with simulation theory. If reality is code-based, maybe time is just one parameter, and the system can glitch or momentarily load a prior save state, giving you a sudden rush of déjà vu or letting you physically re-experience an event. If that code reversion is partial, some memory in you remains from the first pass at that event, explaining your pre-knowledge of details. Alternatively, maybe the system lumps bits of timeline data from multiple runs, leading you to vaguely recall an event that, in this run, is brand new. It's reminiscent of a software bug where the game environment replays or a chunk of memory incorrectly references old data. Hardcore glitch adherents find it more intuitive than believing the unstoppable arrow of time just spontaneously reversed. Of course, none of this is scientifically proven, but it can be more psychologically satisfying to imagine a cosmic software slip than to say your neurons randomly conjured a hyperreal sense of reliving the same moment. We also can't dismiss simpler neurological factors. Déjà vu is fairly well studied in mild forms. Temporal lobe misfiring is a leading theory. People with certain types of epilepsy can experience intense, prolonged déjà vu episodes right before a seizure. Time slips might be episodes of dissociation or mini blackouts. These frameworks can explain a lot of mild cases. Yet some experiences go far beyond a quick mental glitch, featuring elaborate details or external changes that can't be pinned on internal misperception alone. That gap is where glitch enthusiasts insert alternative interpretations, time loops, partial merges of parallel timelines, or bursts of exotic physics bridging future and past. Culturally, we see repeated references to such phenomena. Legends talk of travelers stepping into fairy rings and returning to find years have passed or no time at all has passed. Ancient myths abound with heroes losing track of time in enchanted groves, reminiscent of the missing time stories in modern glitch lore. People wonder if these tales reflect a universal human capacity to occasionally slip out of the normal timeline, dressed up as magical folklore in older eras. Now we call them time slips or temporal anomalies, but perhaps it's the same underlying event. The continuity of such stories across cultures suggests that the feeling of time misbehaving resonates deeply in the human psyche. Whether literal or metaphorical, it's embedded in our collective consciousness. A further dimension arises in daily decision-making. Some swear they occasionally sense a moment of time expansion or time freeze during emergencies, letting them react with superhuman speed. Could that be an adrenaline-based perceptual shift, or is it an actual local slowdown of time for them alone? Science typically sees it as the brain processing events faster under stress. But in glitch circles, it's sometimes cited as real temporal elasticity, your personal timeline diverging from the standard pace. Similarly, stories of near-death experiences often mention a life review in a fraction of a second, as though time collapsed to show you an entire swirl of events. Is that neural phenomena, or a sign that time is fluid in consciousness? And then there's the cumulative effect on how people interpret memory once they've had a few strong déjà vu or time slip episodes. They may wonder if all their linear memories are illusions. Could we be rewriting bits of the past constantly, and these ephemeral glimpses are just the moments we catch the rewriting in action? If you suspect that, your entire life narrative becomes less reliable. That can be liberating. Perhaps you're free to shape your reality in more ways than you realized, or frightening, as if no fact is truly anchored. Some find it a powerful impetus to live more in the present, not trusting memory or future planning as absolute. Others respond with heightened anxiety, feeling unmoored from normal continuity. Either way, these small disruptions of time in daily life can reconfigure your philosophical stance quite drastically. We might also compare them to illusions like the Mandela effect, where groups recall different versions of history. Déjà vu or time slips tend to be more personal, but in rare cases, multiple people share the same out-of-time moment or confirm they both saw the clock jump from 12:10 to 12:05. Such collective experiences are rarer but more convincing as anomalies. If you and a friend both see the day reset 5 minutes, that's harder to dismiss as one person's mental slip. Granted, it's still anecdotal, but such stories feed the sense that these time anomalies aren't purely internal illusions. What does one do with that sense of time unreliability once it manifests? Some lean into it, exploring meditative or esoteric practices that purportedly grant control over micro-time loops or glean messages from the future. Others try to ignore it, chalking everything up to an overactive imagination. Either stance underscores how intangible the phenomenon remains. Because we can't replicate or measure it in a controlled setting, it stays in the realm of personal testimony. But that intangible nature is exactly why it's considered a reality glitch, an ephemeral break in the normal rules that leaves behind only subjective confusion, no hard proof. The question, are these experiences purely psychological or do they reflect genuine time anomalies? Resonates throughout glitch lore. Traditional science is fairly certain that time flows steadily in everyday contexts, and that illusions of time distortion come from brain processes. But glitch adherents question whether that's too quick a dismissal, given how little we truly understand about consciousness and its relationship to time. Perhaps these anomalies are rare boundary cases in which the typical constraints slip, and one can briefly slip to a parallel instance or rerun an event. In that sense, déjà vu might be a micro-symptom of a time loop framework that ordinarily stays hidden beneath stable illusions. Ultimately, the presence of time slips and déjà vus in daily life reminds us that our perception of time is not as fixed and mechanistic as we assume. Even if every incident can be explained by neurology or memory quirks, the experiences themselves carry a potent emotional and philosophical charge. They show us how a single moment of feeling we relived the present or lost a chunk of time can rock our worldview more than any typical glitch like a wrong color on a brand logo. Because time is fundamental to our sense of order, messing with it, even briefly, invokes existential questions. Are we truly moving from past to future, or is that just a comforting narrative? In the end, time slips and déjà vus remain personal riddles. You might exit one of these episodes relatively unshaken, or you might never see your daily chronology the same way again. Some treat them as ephemeral curiosities, grin at the weirdness, then go back to normal life. Others dig deeper, collecting stories of repeated déjà vu or repeated slips, hoping to find patterns that might reveal the mechanics of these anomalies. So far, no definitive pattern has emerged. But that might be the essence of a glitch. It defies repeatability, revealing a crack in reality only when the system falters for a second. If you do experience a time slip or a déjà vu that's more vivid than usual, you might walk away with an uncanny reverence for how fragile your timeline truly is, how your sense of a linear flow might just be another layer of illusions that occasionally sputters and reveals the cosmic weirdness beneath. It's not guaranteed to be an actual tear in time, but the possibility alone, magnified by your emotional jolt, can reshape how you view the hours, days, and years you once assumed unshakably real. Redacted Earth is the name given by some reality glitch enthusiasts to an unsettling possibility that entire regions, settlements, or even once thriving communities can effectively vanish from the shared record of our planet's geography, leaving behind only ghostly scraps of references in old maps or documents that nobody else seems to acknowledge. At first glance, this might sound like a simple matter of old cartographic mistakes or fictional travelers' tales, like the many phantom islands of early maritime history. But proponents of the redacted Earth notion insist there's something more systematic at work, a quiet but deliberate erasure of places that used to be part of Earth's recognized terrain. It's as though someone or something carefully deleted them from collective memory, official archives, and modern maps, so thoroughly that even digital searches produce zero mention. For anyone encountering a stray clue, a name of a forgotten district in a dusty newspaper, a mention of a village with no modern trace, or a reference in a genealogical register that can't be pinned to the recognized geography, the effect can be deeply disconcerting. You realize we usually take Earth's cartography for granted, trusting that if a place existed, it must be well documented. The redacted Earth phenomenon challenges that assumption, suggesting that entire fragments of our planet's layout may have been silently removed from common knowledge. Normally, when a settlement dies out, through war, environmental change, or gradual migration, its memory still tends to survive in local histories, ruin sites, or archival references. We can find mention in official records or the writings of historians. But in redacted Earth cases, those official records seem to have been scoured clean. It's not a matter of a place being destroyed or abandoned, then commemorated as a lost city. It's more like an entire swath of reality was redacted, so that no official trace remains. All that might persist are ephemeral relics, an old letter describing a family home in a non-existent county, a stray footnote in an antique gazette that references a minor province you can't locate in modern atlases, or a mention in an explorer's log about a small port that no current maritime record acknowledges. The handful of references don't conclusively prove anything, but they strongly hint that there was once a recognized place. And if you follow up by checking official data, you find a jarring silence. People from the region might claim they never heard of it. Government offices might show a blank where you'd expect a historical mention. Searching online or in mainstream historical compendiums yields no direct hits. At first, you suspect a routine confusion. Maybe the name changed, or it was spelled differently in older texts. That happens all the time with archaic place names. But then you notice that even alternative spellings yield nothing. Or you discover multiple documents from different eras referencing the same location with consistent details, size, local industries, the approximate location on the map. Yet modern resources treat that entire chunk of geography as uninhabited wilderness or consolidated under some general label. If you dig deeper, you might encounter local rumors about how there used to be a settlement in those hills, but one day it disappeared, or how older relatives occasionally spoke of traveling to a region that apparently doesn't exist anymore. They might recall anecdotes about farmland, or a distinctive accent, or a distinctive architectural style. Yet no official library or national archive can confirm any aspect of it. People who champion the redacted Earth viewpoint sometimes treat it as an extreme glitch scenario. The environment might not be as stable as we think, and entire pieces of Earth can be unrendered or forcibly reconfigured. If we do live in a simulation, maybe certain assets or zones are removed in an update, and the code rewrites the rest of reality to pretend that area never existed. Or if we prefer conspiratorial angles, perhaps a powerful entity forcibly evacuated a region, maybe for secret research or containment of something, and purged the public record to keep it hidden. In less sci-fi terms, it might be a historical phenomenon akin to damnatio memoriae on a geographic scale, except carried out so thoroughly it leaves almost no trace. The question is, who or what has the power to enforce that level of erasure? Skeptics respond that any claimed examples could be explained by hoaxes, confusion, or spurious references. After all, cartographic history brims with phantom islands and mislabeled territories that never physically existed. But redacted Earth fans say there's a difference. If it were a simple mislabel or a piece of fiction, we'd see contradictions or disclaimers in the historical record. Instead, they claim to find multiple references describing these vanished locales as if they were perfectly real. And it's not just old mistakes from centuries ago. Sometimes references appear in mid-20th century newspapers or official-sounding reports, only to vanish from the public domain. On top of that, they discover the region in question was never famous or mythic. So why would it be repeated in diverse minor sources if it was just an error? The phenomenon can be personal. Maybe your grandfather insisted he spent a few years living in a small mountain town named X, relating stories of local roads, shops, or even neighbors. But if you now try to find that mountain town, it's nowhere on any map, and no local official has records of it. You rummage through family documents, hoping for a birth certificate or letter showing that address, only to find them missing, or references that vanish once you try to show them to someone else, in a manner reminiscent of a glitch. It's easy to suspect your grandfather's memory was faulty, but if the detail level in his stories is too high, you get that creeping suspicion that a real place was wiped off the map. Maybe he managed to hold onto intangible recollections from a branch of reality that was undone. Or maybe the place physically existed until some unknown event triggered a meltdown, wiping it from official knowledge. The concept might remind you of the Mandela effect, except here it's about physical geography or entire municipal histories. Instead of misremembered brand spellings or movie lines, you have an entire location that large segments of people either do not recall or outright deny ever existed, whereas a smaller group, or you personally, remember it clearly. The difference is that a location is presumably more substantial than a brand name. If an entire area was real, you'd expect property records, old photos, references in local histories. Their apparent absence accentuates the feeling that something or someone methodically removed them. It can be more disturbing than misremembering a cartoon show's name. This concerns a chunk of Earth, which shouldn't just vanish. Observers of the phenomenon note that illusions or sloppy record-keeping can't explain the thoroughness of some alleged erasures. You might find an 1890 newspaper series describing everyday life in a small rural municipality, with details like a local fair, the mayor's name, and so forth. Yet every official state record from that region claims no such municipality existed. Census reports skip it. Modern local inhabitants have never heard of it. If you bring the old newspaper clippings to the archives, they might wave it off as an error or a fictitious story. But the writing style is so mundane, full of day-to-day events, that it hardly reads like fiction. Why would multiple articles detail the local orchard's harvest or disputes about road maintenance if it was wholly invented? It's that normal, unremarkable detail that makes Redacted Earth incidents creepier. If it were a sensational rumor, we'd suspect a hoax. The banality of everyday references, repeated across multiple sources, suggests a real place that was integrated into everyday life, then systematically plucked from the record. Some anecdotes revolve around vanished infrastructure. An entire railway line or canal system that older documents depict or old maps show, but which no modern map acknowledges, and which you can't physically find in the terrain. If you ask older residents, they might recall a relative speaking about traveling on that line. But official transport histories claim no line ever operated there. Possibly it was built and then dismantled with records lost. But how do you lose all records so completely? Usually, you'd find at least relic tracks or foundation stones or a trail of references in official budgets. The near-total absence hints at something more elaborate. Glitch-minded folks say it's akin to a retcon, as if reality's timeline rewrote that railway out of existence. Another angle is whether partial references remain in online caches, quickly disappearing once discovered. Some claim they found random geolocated pages or references to a small district that vanish after a few refreshes, or old search results that lead to dead links. That might be normal data rot or website restructuring, but from a Redacted Earth viewpoint, it's suspiciously reminiscent of active censorship. The phenomenon can feed paranoia. Each time you find a clue to a missing territory, it might vanish from the net soon after. People might attempt to screenshot these findings, but then the screenshots mysteriously corrupt, or the data is still insufficient to prove the place existed. Such ephemeral evidence fits the hallmark of a glitch, always one step beyond definitive verification. If you try telling the story to outsiders, you sound like you're chasing phantoms. It's worth underscoring that in real-world cartographic history, entire islands or towns have indeed been reported incorrectly. Many old explorers logged sightings that turned out to be illusions, fog banks, misread coordinates. But typically, those illusions were recognized and corrected over time, with historians documenting them as phantom places. The difference with Redacted Earth is that the references suggest a place integrated into daily life, not just an error from a single expedition. And it's not recognized or joked about as a known phantom location. It's simply stricken from the ledger as if it never was. People who uncover such references find the near-complete erasure suspiciously thorough. Another recurring theme is local rumor. Older villagers or family elders might mention traveling beyond that ridge, where so-and-so used to live, but the official county map shows no settlement there, never has. If pressed, the locals might shrug, half doubting their own memory, explaining that they heard those stories from their grandparents. Or maybe they recall a time they themselves visited, but as decades passed, references vanished. Could it be that the area was forcibly cleared for a military project or an environmental disaster, followed by official hush-up? Possibly. But in glitch communities, speculation is more exotic. That region was despawned by cosmic software, or we collectively shifted to a new timeline that excludes that territory. The ephemeral or contradictory references are the leftover echoes from that shift. In other glitch lore, sometimes entire families or genealogies vanish similarly, leaving genealogical references that can't be matched to any living descendants or official records. This merges with Redacted Earth if the family's home region was also wiped. People might interpret it as an entire population removed from the official version of reality. A few diaries or letters remain, testifying to their existence, but official genealogies show no such line of descent. In normal contexts, that would be a meltdown in record-keeping. But if you find multiple overlapping references from different families, the meltdown starts looking deliberate. Who or what would go to such lengths and why? The tension between calling it a grand conspiracy versus a cosmic glitch pervades every conversation about Redacted Earth. The conspiratorial approach posits that certain powerful agencies, governmental or otherwise, have reason to hide these places. Maybe they're sites for secret experiments, or entire communities that discovered something the powers that be once suppressed. They systematically purge references from official data, reassign cartographic details, and rely on the public's short memory. But the cosmic glitch view is more metaphysical. Maybe those locations truly existed in a parallel branch or older timeline, and we now live in a reality in which they never did. The leftover references are errors that slip through. If that's the case, no mundane authority is behind it. Rather, reality's self-correcting mechanism tries to remove traces, but can't fully. Either approach ends up describing a phenomenon that's almost impossible to investigate in a mainstream sense. You can't easily prove the existence of something that official records disclaim. You can't produce living residents from a place that was systematically emptied or never recognized. All you have are minor textual clues or ephemeral bits of testimony. That ephemeral nature is precisely why many folks dismiss Redacted Earth as imaginative speculation. Yet the personal experiences of stumbling across these anomalies can be so striking that the dismissal doesn't quell the sense of encountering a serious puzzle. People who find a half-dozen references to an unknown territory in old local newspapers might come away convinced that territory was real. But they stand alone in that conviction, lacking an institution that will verify or help research it. They might share it on glitch forums, receiving echoes of similar stories from others across the globe. A scattered network of lost places, each apparently redacted from different corners of Earth, might form a hidden tapestry of anomalies. Parallels exist in fictional narratives about worlds behind illusions, or about censors wiping entire stories from history. The difference is that, in real glitch accounts, the evidence is small-scale, crocheted into obscure diaries or ephemeral archives, just enough to spark doubt. If it were purely made up, you might expect sensational claims. Instead, it's typically mundane references. That banality can ironically be the strongest argument for authenticity, because it's not sensational. Why would someone forge multiple normal-sounding references about roads, families, or minor municipal disputes if not to reflect something genuinely real? Yet we can't discount the possibility of old confusions. The human capacity for error or playful hoax is vast, especially if spread across multiple documents or slightly misread sources. Meanwhile, the notion of a cosmic or conspiratorial force editing geography remains extraordinary, requiring extraordinary proof, which we don't have. Still, even a whisper of that possibility can be enough to shift your worldview. Perhaps next time you see an old map or a reference to a place you don't recognize, you'll wonder, was this an actual place, now redacted? Or next time you talk to an older relative about the region they once lived in, and they mention a county name that doesn't ring a bell, you might dig deeper than usual, checking to see if that county vanished from modern data. If you encounter blank stares and no record, you might find yourself entering the labyrinth of contradictory clues. And if every official channel denies the place, you might start to suspect you've brushed against the edges of Redacted Earth, that intangible corridor of glitch reality where entire geographies can be wiped from the script. In that sense, it's not just a curiosity but a direct challenge to how we frame Earth as fully charted, fully known. The idea that Earth can have holes in it that we collectively fail to see is deeply unnerving, reminiscent of a dream world that reconfigures itself behind your back. Many glitch watchers ultimately acknowledge that, lacking solid proof, Redacted Earth remains an intriguing but unconfirmed phenomenon. They accumulate anecdotal stories, hold them in an open file labeled possible large-scale reality tampering, and wait for a bigger smoking gun that might never arrive. Some propose a step-by-step approach to investigating. Locate an alleged missing place in enough separate historical sources, cross-reference them carefully, talk to modern locals in that region, and see if there's any physical clue on the land that might remain. Foundation ruins, traces of roads. So far, such detective work often yields perplexing near-hits but no decisive confirmation. Maybe an overgrown trail suggests there was once a road leading deeper into the forest, but it dead ends in brambles. Or a half-buried sign with faded lettering might be found, but it's too corroded to read fully. The puzzle remains incomplete, fueling more speculation. In the end, Redacted Earth is, like many reality glitches, shaped by the intangible intersection of personal testimony, ephemeral textual references, and the near impossibility of pinning down a phenomenon that's allegedly been scrubbed from official reality. If one day a major missing territory reappeared or a hidden archive spilled full details about an entire region that was systematically erased, it would cause an earthquake in our understanding of Earth's geography. Until then, the idea lingers as a haunting possibility, that the map we rely on might not be final, that entire enclaves or topographies could have been carefully removed from recognition, leaving only cryptic clues in old newspapers or diaries for the few curious souls who bother to piece them together. It's a reminder that even in an age of global satellite imaging and hyperdocumented data, pockets of unacknowledged reality might exist, or might once have existed, challenging the assumption that every corner of Earth is fully accounted for. If we truly inhabit a reality prone to updates or curated data, the phenomenon of Redacted Earth is the ultimate glitch, a testament that not just time or memory can shift, but the very ground beneath our feet may be subject to quiet, systematic erasure. Whether it's an advanced conspiracy, a cosmic retcon, or an overreading of historical oddities, it sparks a deep, lingering question. How certain can we be that the world we see today is the entire story, unedited and wholly real? The possibility that Earth itself can be redacted stirs both dread and fascination, underscoring that even the map we trust might be an incomplete or manipulated snapshot, not the absolute testament of what truly stands or once stood beneath the sky. Intrusive Godmode moments. Intrusive Godmode moments is the label some people give to sudden, disconcerting episodes where you, or someone you witness, temporarily exhibits abilities that defy normal human limits, as if a switch were flipped granting near-omnipotent power for a brief slice of time. One moment, you're just an ordinary person in an ordinary situation, and the next, you're doing something so superhuman or reality warping that it leaves you reeling afterward, unsure how it even happened. It might be a physical feat, like impossibly catching a tumbling stack of dishes with perfect precision, or jumping a distance you know you shouldn't be able to clear, and yet it doesn't end there. Sometimes these episodes hint at control over external events. You strongly sense you can steer random outcomes, or the world around you moves in concert with your will. Even when the effect fades after a second or two, it imprints a surreal memory. You felt unstoppable, as though you hacked reality's code. In glitch circles, These incidents are coined intrusive Godmode moments because they intrude upon normal life with a jarring impression that you briefly stepped into a cheat mode not meant for mortal players. For some, the phenomenon first appears as a bizarre flash of reflexes. You might be strolling through a grocery store. A stranger's bag tears open, and items spill in multiple directions. Before you consciously realize what you're doing, your arms dart out and catch half the falling objects in midair, your feet pivoting precisely to block others from rolling away. It's so fluid, so improbably well-timed, that you shock yourself afterward, half expecting applause. But onlookers might just blink, chalking it up to a fluke of agility or adrenaline. Yet you know it felt more than that, as if time slowed or you anticipated every bounce, responding with reflexes beyond normal capacity. That fleeting sense of, I can do the impossible, can fade in seconds, leaving you breathless and puzzled. Or perhaps no one else saw it, which only enhances the glitch vibe. This extraordinary power erupted in private, then vanished. Yet intrusive Godmode moments aren't solely about reflexes. Some are about perceiving or controlling random outcomes in a way that defies chance. Maybe you're playing a casual game with friends and, all of a sudden, you know exactly how the dice will land or which card you'll draw. You continue testing it, predicting or forcing improbable sequences in a row, until your friends stare in disbelief. Then, abruptly, the feeling of omnipotence dissipates, and you revert to normal probability. You're left wondering how you manipulated chance so easily, as if you gleaned a backdoor into the random number generator of the universe. It's reminiscent of a video game cheat code. You press a hidden combination and for half a minute you bend the rules, then it times out. Some individuals frame it in terms of heightened focus or flow state. They suspect adrenaline or concentration made them temporarily supercompetent, a phenomenon recognized in certain near-accident stories. But intrusive Godmode moments go further, occasionally involving feats that appear to break physical or probabilistic constraints. People describe moving an object with minimal contact or forcing a locked door open with strength they didn't know they had, like those stories of mothers lifting cars to save their child, but in less dire circumstances. The key difference is the deep conviction that they tapped into a glitch, not just adrenaline. They describe an actual sense of, I could do anything if I wanted, even if they only tested it briefly. Then it's gone, returning them to normal in a blink, with no real explanation. The word intrusive is used because these moments often catch you off guard. You might not be seeking superhuman ability. It just invades your routine, typically triggered by some minor crisis or random impulse. In that second, you sense reality is malleable, responding to your commands or letting you exceed normal boundaries. Some recount a scenario. A friend is about to drop something valuable off a balcony, and without thinking, you leap across a gap you know is too wide to cross. You land it perfectly, rescue the item, and only later realize the jump was physically beyond your capacity. It feels almost akin to a glitch in the physics engine. The moment you think, I must do this, the rules shift around your intention. Then normal physics reassert, leaving you questioning your memory. Did you hallucinate, or is your vantage of what you did accurate? Skeptics might argue these are illusions of memory, exaggerations after the fact. Possibly a normal agile catch or strong push, later recalled as superhuman because the adrenaline made it feel more dramatic. But some incidents are too glaring to brush off. People recount witnesses who also stand in shock, saying, "How did you do that?" Or, "That was impossible." In certain stories, multiple observers confirm they saw something that shouldn't have been feasible. Yet it's fleeting, unrepeatable, so it's relegated to anecdote territory, a curiosity overshadowed by normal life. That ephemeral character, coming from nowhere, lasting moments, leaving minimal trace, makes it well-suited to a reality glitch interpretation. You stumbled on an unintended Godmode feature in the cosmic software, and the system quickly yanked it away once noticed. The name also resonates with gaming culture, where Godmode typically means unlimited power, invincibility, infinite ammo, or controlling game events. Imagine that bleeding into real life for a few seconds, letting you direct improbable coincidences or manifest feats of skill. Some accounts even talk about reading people's thoughts or anticipating movement so precisely that it borders on telepathy. The key is that it's involuntary. These individuals don't claim to do it at will. They say it intrudes upon them unpredictably, leaving them more confused than proud. If it were a stable ability, they'd practice it or show it off, but it's gone as quickly as it appears, sometimes leaving them rattled, as though they glimpsed the structure behind reality and found it wasn't as rigid as they believed. An alternate explanation ties it to near psychedelic or dissociative states. Perhaps for a heartbeat, your perception speeds up or your reflex processing intensifies, reminiscent of certain illusions. But that fails to account for stories that go beyond advanced reflexes into territory like, the object hovered in my hand without me holding it, or I swiped at thin air and a fragile vase rebounded as though a force field deflected it. Granted, such extremes might be confabulations or illusions. Still, the emotional testimony is compelling. The experience is described as unequivocally beyond normal physics or chance. In glitch communities, these episodes are prized accounts, though also the hardest to verify or replicate. Interestingly, you find parallels in various mythic or religious traditions where saints or mystics display miraculous powers at urgent moments, a sudden healing, or an impossible rescue. People sometimes connect that to the idea of divine intervention, but from a glitch worldview, it might be more like an unintended cheat code embedded in reality, occasionally triggered by spiritual fervor or emotional desperation. Similarly, certain martial arts legends speak of masters performing superhuman feats in rare bursts. The concept of intrusive Godmode moments suggests these aren't exclusive to revered masters or saints, but can pop up for ordinary folks under random triggers, only to vanish before they fully grasp what happened. Another angle is simulation theory or advanced consciousness frameworks. Maybe your mind temporarily logged in with higher privileges, as if the system incorrectly recognized you as an admin user. For that short period, you rewrote local rules, be it physics or probability. Then, as the glitch is noticed, the privileges are revoked. People describing this sometimes talk about a mental shift, an intense calm or clarity washing over them, a sense that they can do anything if they will it strongly enough. Then it passes, replaced by confusion. Others mention a manic or surreal state, as though they glimpsed a hidden control panel for the environment. However fleeting, it plants the seed that physical laws might be more negotiable than taught, or at least that your normal relationship with them can glibly dissolve under certain conditions. One question: why do these episodes never last? If you truly step into God mode, why not remain there? Possibly because it's inherently unstable or the system self-corrects. Or maybe the emotional shock breaks your focus. You realize you're doing the impossible, get startled, and lose it. Some accounts say they tried to replicate it immediately afterward, like repeatedly flipping a coin and expecting to control the outcome. But they fail, the ephemeral magic gone. The unstoppable feeling, that sense of total mastery over events, is replaced by normal, fallible reality. That abrupt return to normal can be deeply frustrating or humbling. While there's no systematic study of intrusive God mode moments, anecdotal data suggests they often occur in crisis or high-stress contexts. Someone about to be hit by a car, a child falling off a high ledge. Perhaps the adrenaline-laced environment triggers a flow state on steroids. Or from a glitch viewpoint, maybe the code's safety net momentarily grants a user override to avert catastrophic outcomes. People sometimes reframe it morally. The system or universe steps in to let you save someone, then retracts that privilege. Alternatively, it might not be tied to crisis at all. Some have experienced it playing casual sports or silly bar games, effortlessly dominating for a few minutes before losing the spark. The unpredictability is part of the weirdness. Culturally, we see echoes in superhero origin stories or mythical heroes briefly gifted divine power. Yet in modern glitch lore, these events are neither sustained nor explained by an external deity. They're random, unauthorized God mode intrusions into day-to-day existence. This can lead to existential aftershocks as the person grapples with the question, how real are the physical laws I've known all my life if I can occasionally bypass them? Usually, daily routines reassert themselves, and the memory recedes into an odd anecdote. But for some, it's a turning point that fosters a deeper suspicion about the nature of reality. Maybe you are in a cosmic game with patchy enforcement of rules, Or maybe your consciousness occasionally exerts a direct influence over matter. Skeptics label these stories as mild illusions, adrenaline feats, or subjective exaggerations in hindsight. And realistically, many might be. The difference is how forcibly the experience breaks the person's sense of normal probability or physics in that moment. If you talk to them right after, they're often breathless with shock, describing it as something no mere adrenaline rush can replicate. Even years later, retelling it can bring back that chill of, I can't rationalize what I did. Without documented evidence, say a camera capturing them literally defying gravity, these remain unsubstantiated. That ephemeral nature is reminiscent of typical reality glitches. Ephemeral, dramatic, defying explanation, and leaving the witness both thrilled and disturbed. You might ask, are intrusive Godmode moments harmful or beneficial overall? Some describe them as life-saving, letting them avert disaster. Others say they're neutral, a weird outburst of capability that resolves a minor predicament. A few even suggest it can be dangerous if you rely on it happening again. You might fool yourself into thinking you can always invoke super reflexes, leading to reckless behavior. But the phenomenon is called intrusive precisely because it's not under your control. It happens to you at random. You can't train it or plan for it. As a result, it's less a superpower and more of a glitch cameo that might help or just baffle you, then fade into memory. In the broader scheme, intrusive Godmode moments dovetail with other anomalies, like time slips or NPC encounters, to paint a picture of a reality that's far less stable than standard science or worldview acknowledges. Each glitch phenomenon breaks a different rule. Time anomalies break chronological flow, Redacted Earth breaks geographic records, and these Godmode bursts break normal personal limitations or physical laws. If you assemble them all, you get a portrait of a cosmos that is superficially consistent but prone to sporadic cracks, revealing deeper or alternative truths. For some, that might mean a cosmic intelligence occasionally editing the script. For others, it might be a digital simulation bug, or simply illusions we conjure under stress. In a sense, these episodes mirror illusions from near-death or mystical states, except they appear spontaneously in everyday life. People sometimes draw parallels to chi energy or accounts of monks performing impossible feats under the right mental conditions. The difference is that in those traditions, you cultivate the state through discipline. Intrusive Godmode moments have no such lead-up. They strike unpredictably, last briefly, and vanish. This unpredictability fosters the sense of glitch rather than learned skill. It's as though you glitched into admin privileges for a second, ignoring the normal limitations coded into your character. That ephemeral nature means you can't replicate it in a lab or prove it to others, which is precisely why it sits in the realm of anecdotal glitch lore. People might share these stories on message boards or in private conversations. Some folks, upon hearing them, may recall their own moment when time slowed, or an impossible catch occurred, or they sensed they were controlling outcomes with absolute certainty. Usually, life continues on, but the memory remains a personal puzzle. If you've had it happen, you likely still replay it in your head, wondering if you misremember. But the emotional memory is so vivid you can't just dismiss it. That tension between your mind's certainty and the normal worldview's denial cements it as a glitch, a fleeting override of reality's usual script, so transient and outlandish that it can't be codified or reproduced at will. We might never unravel it fully. Possibly it's a synergy of your body's extreme stress response, a fleeting mental shift that merges subconscious pattern recognition with a heightened sense of control, conjuring the illusion of superpower. Possibly it's literally a cosmic code error letting you break the rules momentarily. Either way, intrusive Godmode moments stand as one of the most spectacular forms of everyday glitch. Short bursts of something truly extraordinary that seems to place you or someone you observe outside normal human bounds. For the person experiencing it, it can be a reality-rattling highlight, forcing them to reevaluate whether physical or probabilistic limitations are truly absolute. The experience might not revolutionize your entire life, but it can haunt your understanding of what's possible. After all, if you did something once that by all accounts you shouldn't be able to do, who's to say the same cosmic glitch can't reemerge at another time, potentially in an even bigger, more reality-bending way? In that lingering question lies both the thrill and the unease of living in a world where, just maybe, normal rules are not as ironclad as we imagine, and where, for a precious few seconds, you might find yourself tapping into a God mode you never knew existed. The vanishing people phenomenon. The vanishing people phenomenon is the unsettling claim that certain individuals, sometimes entire groups, can abruptly disappear from our shared reality. Gone without a trace, leaving little to no evidence they ever existed. It's not about kidnappings, witness-protected identities, or typical missing persons cases where we find at least a trail of leads. In these stories, the person simply ceases to be part of the world's record, as if someone hit a cosmic delete key. Family members discover that official databases hold no mention of their relative. Coworkers can't remember a longtime colleague's name, or entire neighborhoods behave as though the vanished person was never there. Sometimes the disappearance is physical. You see someone literally vanish before your eyes. Other times, it's more about the world erasing them from documents and collective memory. Either way, people who encounter these scenarios describe a profound, disquieting sense of having witnessed a fundamental breach in reality's continuity. Typically, when a person goes missing in the ordinary sense, there's still some record. Birth certificates, photos, acquaintances who recall them, addresses, or job histories. The phenomenon we call the vanishing people defies that. You might recall a friend named Anna who lived next door for years. Then, one morning, you realize you haven't seen Anna in a while. You ask neighbors, but they have no clue who you're talking about. You check your phone for texts or pictures with Anna. Somehow they're missing. You might dig deeper, certain you're not imagining the entire friendship. But every official record is blank. Your family insists you're mixing them up with someone else. And you can't even find a trace of Anna's existence in local directories or social media. It's as though she evaporated from the entire world, or worse, was never officially part of it at all. The experience can be terrifying, leaving you questioning your own memory. Some even worry they're hallucinating or losing their sanity. But if you trust your recollections, you face a bigger question. How can reality so thoroughly remove a person's entire presence? Stories of vanishing people aren't new. Folklore from many cultures speaks of individuals taken by fairies, abducted by spirits, or pulled into hidden realms, leaving behind no trace except rumor. But the vanishing people phenomenon in modern glitch lore frames it differently, focusing on everyday individuals who lead normal lives, until one day they just cease to exist in our reality. At times, these vanishings happen abruptly. A coworker at the next cubicle steps out for lunch and never returns, and by the end of the day, it's as if the cubicle was always empty. No nameplate, no HR record, no desk tchotchkes. If you try to bring it up, your boss or colleagues look at you blankly, insisting that position was never filled or that you're mixing up your floor with another. You might check your phone for that coworker's number or old messages, only to find them gone. It's an experience so bizarre that a rational mind has trouble absorbing it. Usually, you end up questioning your own memory. Did I dream up that coworker's existence? But you recall entire conversations, lunch breaks, jokes shared. Yet not a shred of external proof remains. Sometimes, the phenomenon inverts. It's the vanished person's friends, family, or acquaintances who disappear from recollection, while the person themselves remains behind, frantic, as though the entire social context around them was purged. You might hear of someone who swears they had a spouse or a child, only for those individuals to vanish, leaving zero official records. Neighbors recall glimpses but can't confirm details. Some might even lose those glimpses under subtle confusion. The traumatized individual is left with intense grief and a sense that reality has robbed them of their loved ones. And worse, no one else acknowledges the loved ones ever existed. This version of the phenomenon is reminiscent of reality resets, except it focuses on erasing specific people from the environment, severing them from any outside memory. One might call it a cosmic disconnection, as if a line in the program was removed and everything else rearranged so that the removed persons never appear in the logs. We can't ignore the possibility that many of these stories could be illusions, mental health issues, or a meltdown in record-keeping. Some might be hoaxes or conflated missing person tales. Yet the vanishing people phenomenon consistently features an element of total erasure. No police files, no social media footprints, no relatives who admit they existed. Typically, a genuine missing person case will spark searches, yield mention in newspapers, or remain in official archives. Here, even the simplest acknowledgement, like an old yearbook photo, disappears. People describing such vanishings come away rattled to their core, often seeking out glitch or paranormal communities for validation, as they can't find it in the mainstream world. Tellingly, mainstream channels reject the notion that a living, documented individual can be systematically wiped from existence so thoroughly, so maybe it's a trick of memory. But that doesn't soothe the narrator's sense of having once interacted with a person who no longer appears in reality's official logs. In rarer, more dramatic accounts, witnesses claim they see someone literally vanish in real time. Possibly they're walking through a crowded area when a random person a few steps ahead dissolves like a glitch in a video game, or simply takes a corner and never emerges on the other side, though there's nowhere else to go. One might see a friend across the street wave at them, then blink, and the friend is gone, with no sign of them or recollection from the friend's family about them ever leaving the house that day. Rationally, we might label such testimonies illusions or a fleeting lapse in attention. But the emotional recollections paint a picture of something that defies normal cause and effect. If you can vanish physically, leaving no body, no search efforts, it implies reality can spontaneously remove individuals from the stage. That's a terrifying thought, reminiscent of an unstoppable cosmic editor cutting characters from the script mid-scene. The phenomenon might also dovetail with experiences of reality merges or timeline shifts, where after some subtle cosmic event, certain individuals are absent from the new timeline. If you suspect a minor timeline jump occurred, it can explain how someone you remember from the old line is missing in the new, with no official footprint left. The leftover is only your memory, like the so-called residue in Mandela effect lore. If no one else recalls them, you face isolation, harboring knowledge that your friend or neighbor existed in the timeline you came from. Some interpret that as an unintentional shift for you, while from everyone else's perspective, that person never existed. The glitch angle is that your memory of them is a leftover from your old timeline data. Another angle is simulation theory. Maybe the system occasionally depawns or deactivates certain NPCs or even real players for reasons unknown and scrubs the environment of references. That might be accidental, a bug, or intentional. The cosmic program decided to remove them. Either way, from your vantage, it's a raw demonstration that the world around you is not as stable as it claims to be. Occasionally, the phenomenon has partial overshadowings in official missing person cases where the relatives discover that not only can they find no trace of the vanished person physically, but official records like birth certificates or IDs also appear tampered with or gone. That can be labeled conspiracy or corruption, but it's more commonly explained as identity theft or bureaucratic slip-ups. Redacted Earth scenarios sometimes overlap, in which a person associated with a region that's also vanished from maps disappears from memory. Regardless, the key difference is the total scope. It's not just that a person is absent from current knowledge. They appear never to have existed, or all references to them are contradictory or vanish as soon as they're pursued. It's that sweeping thoroughness which sets vanishing people beyond typical missing person mysteries. Glitch communities find these stories especially haunting because they invert the usual question of, could I vanish from my own life tomorrow without explanation? Realizing that a friend or relative can simply vanish from reality begs the question. If it happened to them, can it happen to me? Are we subject to cosmic housekeeping where our entire presence can be undone? The fear is primal, a deeper violation than normal death or disappearance. At least in normal tragedy, you expect the living to remember the departed. But in these vanishings, memory itself is under siege, along with the historical record. Some might interpret it religiously as a rapture or a spiritual abduction. Others adopt a cosmic or conspiratorial lens. None of these standpoints can be proven. That leaves only the personal aftershocks for those who remain behind, convinced they witnessed a glitch erasure. The emotional weight of seeing someone vanish physically, or realizing they vanished from documented reality, often triggers introspection in the witness. They may comb through old diaries or phone backups, desperate to find a single snapshot or mention of the vanished friend, only to find blank pages, missing files, or references that dissolve into nonsense upon inspection. This intensifies the sense of a glitch, because it's not just that new records can't be found, but older records you swore existed might degrade or vanish. One might recall printing a group photo that included the missing person, only to discover the physical print no longer shows them, or that the photo is lost from the album entirely. In extreme accounts, even the place they lived, like an apartment or a house, reverts to an earlier occupant or arrangement, as though the occupant never existed in that timeline. The witness is then left with unprovable stories, lodging them in glitch or paranormal communities for any scrap of validation. That ephemeral aspect of the phenomenon is reminiscent of the ephemeral nature of other reality glitches. No matter how strange, they rarely leave permanent, undeniable evidence. The system, if you believe in a simulation or cosmic self-correcting reality, cleans up after each glitch quickly. The only residue is the memory in the observer's mind and perhaps a fleeting reference that too often dissolves upon close examination. This ephemeral residue fosters a self-reinforcing cycle. No official proof means the phenomenon remains unaccepted, which means few talk about it, which in turn means those who do talk about it find no mainstream audience and remain in the margins, further fueling the concept that it's some hidden cosmic occurrence. If vanishings were easily proven, we'd see a global uproar. Instead, they linger as hush-hush stories of unexplained absence. One might wonder if these vanishings correspond to something else, parallel universes out of sync, or spiritual frameworks where certain individuals ascend or are uncreated. In some esoteric traditions, there is the notion that souls can be recalled if they fulfill certain cosmic roles, or if they break some rule. The glitch version is more secular. Perhaps the cosmic software removed a character whose storyline ended or introduced contradictions. Even conspiratorial theories might see it as Men in Black-style operations, erasing certain people who encountered forbidden secrets. The difference from normal conspiracy is how thorough the memory erasure is. Usually, you'd expect someone to recall them or find a birth record. But here, it's as if the entire world was retconned so that the person is gone in every dimension except your own perplexed recollection. It's vital to note that in day-to-day missing person scenarios, family and law enforcement definitely remember the individual, keep case files, etc. That is not the scenario we're discussing. The vanishing people phenomenon is more radical. Entire communities, databases, and archives disclaim the vanished individual. Searching for them meets a vacuum, like searching for a fictional character. This vacuum is what sets it apart, giving it that genuine glitch aura. If it's a cosmic slip, you might never confirm it. You only have your internal sense that something's deeply off. You might even question your mental stability. But the phenomenon endures in glitch lore precisely because so many people have felt that offness. Maybe not many, but enough to accumulate anecdotes, each describing a person that was there, then systematically removed. In a more subtle angle, some speak of partial vanishings, where the person physically remains but is so drastically different that it's like the original person no longer exists. That scenario edges into other phenomena like the NPC effect or memory rewrites, so the vanishing people phenomenon is specifically about an actual disappearance from the timeline. If they remain physically but changed, that's a different glitch. For vanishings, the main hallmark is the abrupt, near-total erasure from references, leaving the witness an outlier in knowledge. Rare but potent, it's an existential bullet to the idea that we can rely on each other's presence in a stable way. Ultimately, the vanishing people phenomenon stands as one of the more frightening corners of reality glitch lore. Time anomalies or déjà vus might disturb your sense of chronology, but vanishings threaten your relationships and sense of security. If someone close to you can vanish in such a cosmic manner, with no record left, then the scaffolding of daily life, where you rely on continuity and documentation, feels precarious. If you're forced to watch as no one else acknowledges the person's existence, you might feel unbelievably alone, carrying a secret the rest of the world denies. This leads some to keep quiet, afraid of ridicule or their own doubts. Others do speak out, publishing accounts in obscure glitch forums, hoping to find a kindred soul who's experienced the same. Some of these stories are heartbreakingly personal, describing how a beloved partner or child vanished from all memory except the narrators. Are these illusions? Are they echoes from a changed timeline? Are they orchestrated removals by unknown forces? Each possibility is chilling in its own right. Many remain unconvinced. They'd point out that you can't truly hide all traces of someone in the digital age if they had a normal life. There'd be cameras, forms, social interactions. The glitch-minded response is that if reality's architecture is malleable at a deeper level, all those cameras, forms, or interactions could be re-rendered or replaced. It sounds like science fiction, unless you've personally run up against a vanished friend or coworker and found no trace of them. Then it becomes disturbingly plausible. Much like all high-level reality glitches, we lack any institutional acceptance or scientific method to test it, so it remains rumor and anecdote, feeding a subculture of watchers who believe not only can things or places vanish from the official timeline, but entire human beings can vanish too, as if they never were. And that's the final note of disquiet. If the vanishing people phenomenon is truly real, none of us is guaranteed a permanent spot in the world's memory. At any point, a cosmic or conspiratorial redact function could remove you, or a friend, or a random stranger you pass on the sidewalk, rewriting the environment so completely that you become a single uncertain witness to what used to be. You might suspect it's improbable, but that's exactly what everyone would say until they stumble on a pile of contradictory references or realize they alone recall someone who, officially, never existed. So perhaps the scariest question is not why does it happen, but how often does it happen without us even noticing? The possibility that many vanishings go undetected because nobody remains to remember them, or because those who do recall them don't speak out, is a dark thought. It implies a hidden fluidity in our social world, where people can be quietly undone. If that is indeed the reality we live in, then the vanishing people phenomenon stands as one of the starkest warnings that our sense of shared existence may be more fragile than we dare admit. And in that fragile gap lies the unsettling possibility that at any moment, the world might rewrite itself again. Only this time, it might be you or me who steps out the door and never reappears in the story's official version, leaving behind nothing but a single memory in some perplexed observer who can't understand why no one else recognizes our absence.